Hello. You are very welcome to the Overlap Rugby podcast. I'm Daragh, this here's Shane.
Hello.
Two brothers talking all things rugby from the point of view of Leinster and Ireland. Yes, it's good to be back. This is episode 123, and we're just kind of checking in on the rugby season. Nice to dip back in. Obviously, it's kind of the off period for certainly the men's internationals, the test windows. Obviously not returning until July.
That's right.
But we're going to check in the interim. There has been a pantheon of rugby to kind of dip into. It's obviously less intense than the top of the echelon stuff in Six Nations and rugby championships to come. But there's been some awesome rugby nonetheless. Club footy as compelling as ever. The European last 16 happened on the weekend. We're going to dig into all of that. But we're actually going to start off the show, as is our mantra, looking at test footy, the women's Six Nations. Last two rounds coming up over the next couple of weekends, all building to that crescendo between England and France. So we're going to look into those games, look into all those teams, see how they stand and where things are at since we last checked in on the competition in round 2, before looking at those aforementioned European rounds of 16 which took place on the weekend, setting up what's sure to be a brilliant end to the domestic season.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we're going to look on. Obviously, we have the quarterfinals decided. We're going to look forward to that in European rugby and the Challenge Cup as well. Before we move on to other club footy as well, the European domestic footy top tours and Premiership and URC does roll on as well. And we're going to look at all them, as well as the Rugby Europe Super Cup, which has reached its denouement now. We have the final two, so we'll look into all of that before we look further afield at places, pastures like America, the MLR. We have SLAR as well in the Southern Hemisphere, or in the South America, and Super Rugby as well. We're going to look briefly at Japan, but also Super Rugby Pasifika is really heating up as well. Some really good games, and that's obviously reaching the end of its part 1 when they're kind of in their two little conferences. We have the Trans-Tasman clashes coming up, so that's getting exciting. We're also going to touch on the 7 series, which has been back in action in our absence as well. Actually, nothing forthcoming this week, but a fair few things have happened. A few teams have returned to the fold, which is exciting. And then we're going to wrap up the show with the news of the week as well, as we normally do.
Yes, indeed. And remember, if you are a fan of what we do, or if you're enjoying the long form rugby chatter that we have, please be sure to like the video, subscribe, do comment down below. We'd love to hear anything you want to get our thoughts on across the rugby world. We're casting a wide eye across everything that's going on at the moment. So if there's anything that you want us to kind of dig into and take a look at, we will be making more shows in the coming weeks as well. So be sure to leave any suggestions or any comments, thoughts you have down below in the comment section. Share with your friends, all of that good stuff. We really do appreciate it. Helps the channel.
Absolutely, yeah. But without any more ado, we are going to crack on to episode 123, and we're going to start, as we alluded to, with the Women's Six Nations, as it is the international intrigue that's going on in the game right now. And we've been absent for a couple of weeks of action from this. The table as it stands, unsurprisingly, England top of the bunch with a flawless 15 points and 3 wins from 3. Just behind them with a flawless but not quite as equally flawless 15 points from a possible 15. France women also in the mix there in second place. Then we have the Welsh women with 2 from 3. A 2-1 record is not too bad. 10 points overall there in third. Then we have our own charges, the Irish women, who got themselves off the mark with a good win against Italy, and they're sitting on 5 points courtesy of that in fourth place. Scotland women did manage 1 bonus point and sit on 1 point in fifth, and then the Italy women bringing up the rear as it stands with 0 points.
Absolutely.
Some of the telling stats from that is just the top 2 in terms of points difference. Obviously England on top on points difference, but I think they've scored 189 points in this tournament, England, so far, and conceded 10. So that's 179 through 3 games of a positive points difference. France, with a not too shabby 107, scored 19 points conceded, but just not quite able to make up that distance. Those two are the only two with a positive points difference record at the moment, and that is kind of telling of what the standard is, and where there's kind of two tournaments going on in this. There's the race for the actual silverware, and then there's kind of the best of the rest going on, which Wales do deserve their win, their lead in that with 2 good wins. But yeah, it's been an interesting tournament that way. It's just the top 2 are very, very good.
Yeah, indeed. It's been intriguing. I think since we last checked in on you, I'm not sure if it was after round 1 or round 2.
It was round 1, I think. We've had round 2 since.
Yeah, indeed. So obviously Ireland's struggling there in that game against the French. I mean, all of these, certainly 3 of the 4 teams beneath England and France have improved massively in different ways since the last time we saw them last year, where they were way behind.
Or last year's Six Nations as well.
Yeah, well, they've all got more physical. They've all like Wales and Scotland are much more physical, much better coached than they used to be. Wales in particular have some energy on them. Like, they're huge pack, and their stick-to-itiveness is very, very impressive, as well as having some classy players like Hannah Jones and Jazz Joyce.
Yeah,
but they're well rounded, put together really well, and the 2 comeback wins illustrative of what professionalism
that win in round 2 over the Scottish was a tight one. Actually, they were down at half time as well, showed that stick-to-itiveness you were talking about. They were 7 points down at half time
when they were 2 scores down, and then came back again after what happened against Ireland. It was a symptomatic of just how impressive they've been. And it was towards the tail end of that game, their forward runners just started to get on top of the Scots, and the Scots were the ones who, despite having some very nice plays in them themselves, they were the ones that came unstuck. And it was a very impressive carry, I believe, from Butchers, the number 6 for Wales, that just opened them up before the winning try was scored by Lewis in that game. Brilliant
that was a great game.
Actually. It was. That was definitely the game of the tournament.
Well, the game of the tournament, definitely the game of the round, because the other one bringing up the rear was England putting 74 to 0 on Italy, which is obviously a bit of a damn squib. The one noteworthy thing from that was they had 14,989 fans, which I think was their greatest home attendance in 12 years and their highest outside of a World Cup. Which is probably not going to remain so, just looking at how that English juggernaut is rolling on. But it's a sign of the popularity that success is bringing, and it's a good thing, because they're moving them around, they're putting them in different grounds, and they're getting great crowds in and great atmospheres as well. That was at I think that was at Kingsholm, that one, which was
they're playing up in Welford Road this week as well, so they could break that. But the Kingsholm crowd was magnificent for that game against Wales. And you should be remiss not to talk about England. I mean, to watch them at the moment, even playing that Welsh team who played well, caused them problems, defended hard, showed their physicality in moments, and ended up just getting unpicked. I mean, the difference in levels between this England team, it's hard to put your finger on it, but there's a Leinster-ish quality to watching them play in terms of just their spacing across the pitch, the quality of passing and carries from everyone from forward to back. But then also just like there's a relentless mentality there. I mean, they're obviously a level above from their opponents, but it's the manner in which they don't come unstuck and do find the tries that they do that's so impressive. I mean, some of those scores towards the tail end of that Wales game, where it was going through all those sets of hands, the runners were coming around the corner, they were just quicker to read the game, as well as being physically dominant in the carry
as well, and all that. That's the confidence is based on all of those things. Is that they're incrementally better in pretty much every aspect, and that's where you see some worldy of tries when they're not in their own way, which they haven't been for quite a long time, because it's just when you're that superior, it is like you say, that they don't kind of choke or kind of tighten up, but they don't show any signs of doing that. They're just comfortable.
They're patient, but also very sort of dynamic and explosive
at times.
Absolutely. Like they know that their offense and their quality is there, and that if they stick to their process, they will find tries, and that the defense will relent. And that's as it was against Wales, and then they started to run in some fabulous scores.
They did, the dam kind of burst on Wales in that one, but we know from the other contests that Wales are a good quality side as well.
For sure,
it's just a sign of what this English monster of it's a monstrous team. We saw it last year when the Black Ferns came to town, and we've been seeing it for the last few years as well.
The offense is a different level. Like when you have a people like Sarah Byrne, who's in a tight head, but like she comes in and she can throw a pass off both hands as well as win all of her carries. That's what they have that none of the other teams have quite as well. And then they also run it's a beautiful English style shape, and they use the whole width of the field. There's constantly different options. It's the evolution of the women's game at lightning speed from kind of 2 years back. You would have said even the best of teams, there's an amateurish quality to all of this. Of course, because most of the players involved are amateur. But to see it move on from a professional point of view this quickly to this level of a team that's just brilliant in all kinds of ways, it's very encouraging. It shows it can be done, but also daunting for everyone who isn't England. Because I have to say, like as good as France are, and as much as you're highlighting their perfect record and their decent points tally, Like,
and they probably improved a little given where they were last year as well, and they put it up to they dispatched the Black Ferns as well. They are looking very, very much the ones riding on England's coattails and the closest to a challenge.
I'm not sure how close they are.
Yeah, it will remain to be seen.
And England look light years ahead. They really do.
They do seem to. France do kind of lean into the power game a little bit more to get them over the line, and so even in some of those contests where they are comfortably superior, their offense doesn't quite look as polished.
Yeah, no, it's their defense that's been winning them games. Their defense and then individual moments from the likes of Sansus who just come up with a crazy chip and chase play and score a try that way, or they'll break the line. Not dissimilar to sort of the men's team in the traditional French rugby. Once they break the line, their support running is great.
Yeah, and actually Drouin's kicking game's very good as well. Their exit game's not bad through her, but it's like whether they have what it takes to match up to that juggernaut.
That's the question, because it is about the defense for France. Like, what they've been doing to teams is putting them under pressure with physicality, forcing errors, and spending large portions of the game without the ball, defending well, moving their way down the field, and then taking scores when that pressure kind of finally tells.
Yeah.
Even against Scotland last time out, they didn't score in the second half. They lost the second half.
Yeah, it's true.
It was sloppy, and like you'd worry for them a little bit. Like, if they can't dominate the game on the defensive side of the ball, which how are they going to dominate the game when England have the ball with that sophisticated attack? There is the potential for that game to become a blowout, but obviously we're getting ahead of ourselves because that game isn't coming up this weekend.
No.
This weekend France do travel to Wales to play good Welsh team, which is also an
interesting
slippery
game.
One.
It's the kind of one that could, see their campaign come unstuck and England getting it a week in advance. But because Wales themselves, the comeback queens, they are absolutely class and don't write them off. Their offense can tick. They're big and physical, and if France are very sloppy, if
Wales
France
are
a little sloppy
it,
and that they are going into that power game, Wales of all the other teams below them seem pretty well equipped to be able to deal with some of that if they're a little inaccurate.
What Wales have that's a priceless weapon against the French right now, because you saw Ireland. Like, as Ireland have a very well developed offense in terms of, it's young, it's fledgling, it's young, but in terms of how they're trying to move their ball, their multi-phase is excellent.
Yeah.
But France put the pressure on them and put the physicality on them and forced loads and loads of errors.
Yeah.
Ireland's style played right into France's defensive strength, and that's how France were able to get over that line pretty easily. And likewise against Italy and Scotland, there was just very little resistance.
There was a gap. And there may still be. We remains to be seen with if France do come guns blazing, there may still be a gap between them and Wales. But Wales are much improved.
What Wales have that the other teams don't is that most of their tries are coming from line out mauls.
Yeah.
They're playing quite a patient game themselves. They do have excellent players. They have the likes of Jazz Joyce, but their good form hasn't been about Jazz Joyce.
It's been about night and day different from what it was last year. It's just like a completely new team in that regard.
If they can get that rolling maul going, then the dynamics of the game change.
Get potentially involved. It is a home game for them, so there's potential there. Our own charges are further down, actually, alongside Scotland. Scotland themselves, much improved, physical, organised, as you'd expect from a team that have qualified for the World Cup. Ireland ourselves kind of rebuilding, as you were alluding to, very, very new in personnel. A lot of the sevens players were involved, not going to be involved for the remainder of the tournament, which is a shame for them. It's going to change the kind of outlook and dynamic of the team, as well as the injury to Sam Monaghan, who's been awesome finding the second row for them. Ireland, we've been excited watching them. I'm glad they got that win over Italy. That was a very, very good win. Bonus point well deserved. Try from Eve Higgins, who's been one of the players of the tournament for Ireland as well, just after half time, was kind of what broke the game open and allowed for that bonus point to end up being accrued. Some good positive signs in what is like the first season of a rebuild for Ireland.
They're going about the game the right way. They're trying to play a very exciting brand, and their multi-phase is excellent. Some of their long sequences are fantastic. And what I like about Greg Williams is that he's emboldening the players and trusting their skill sets. And this year it has at times been to their detriment, particularly against France, because I think the error count was incredibly large against France. They just did not deal with the pressure well, where against Wales and Italy they had just that split second more time. They could kind of focus on the catch and still keep your shape going and get your passes off. France didn't give them that time and they suffered for it.
True.
But at the same time, in terms of evolving and getting to the next level and competing with the likes of the top teams, even in time for a next World Cup, it does start with playing an expansive game and upping the skill set of everyone involved, and that seems to be how Greg McWilliams wants to go
a lot
about
of those
it.
boxes so far.
I'm happy enough.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly happy with the fact that the whole backline is off to play sevens this week.
We will talk about the sevens later on, but like there's only one forthcoming tournament at the end of April for the women in Vancouver that they're going to play, and like the World Cup's not for ages. So I just don't understand. We knew about it before the tournament. It was agreed before. Like the coaches all knew it, the team all knew that was going to be the case, but I just don't see the necessity for it. They're already halfway through a campaign.
They're just trying to build something on the 15s level that involves all of these players.
Yeah,
it's
well, like I don't see how they would benefit anymore from flying out and kind of dipping their toes in the sevens water for one tournament out of the blue rather than sticking with the campaign and then rejoining them next month in Toulouse, which is the next one.
Picking a young team to play sevens out in that tournament and maybe finding a couple of players who might be able to play in the World Cup later on as well as the 15s players might have been a better way to go about it. But as it is, they're going to be without Bevan Parsons, Stacey Flood, Lucy Mulhall, Eve Higgins, Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe, Anna McGann and Brittany Hogan as well.
The guts of that offense that was causing problems to even some teams that were kind of more physical than them. So it's a worry with England coming.
Naupu and so that England game this week could be 100, could be any score. Unfortunately,
hopefully not. Scotland and Italy then as well up at the rear. They're still playing some very good rugby. Italy have been a bit unfortunate in how it's fallen for them so far as well. Just even in terms of their schedule, it was always going to be tough, and then that was a rough loss against Ireland away.
What happened to Italy is that they didn't get the memo to size up when everyone else did. I mean, like this time last year, I was kind of encouraged by how they were going with their kick-free approach. They've been honing their skills, developing their skills, trying to develop a competitive running game, and they had some success with it in recent years. They've had less and less success this year, and especially the closer they get to the try line, the more physical these sides are. They're getting blown away in the contact zone, and while the skills themselves aren't letting them down, the deficiencies in other areas like the kicking game, like the collision winning
carry,
it's really
and then the rucks and everything.
Yeah.
It's all very slow, and they're being forced to kick a little bit more this season as well.
They've just been disappointing. They haven't kicked on. Other sides, with the World Cup in mind, have gotten much bigger, much better drilled in the tight areas, and Italy have been left behind by just about everybody. Unfortunately, I don't see that changing because Scotland, like their problem at the moment, just they're probably not accruing points enough for all the endeavour they have. They had endeavour against England.
That being said, their passing's probably improved a little bit on last year's showing. They're definitely moving the ball a little bit better, but just that incisiveness.
They had a great try to start the second half, the try that took them the 12-point lead against Wales, that they went 13 phases from side of the pitch to side of the pitch. It was always quick ruck ball, recycled it really well and ended up crossing over in the right wing. That was an example of what the Scotland team can be. And they have been physical enough to mix it with everybody. They had some successful scrums against the England team.
Right, actually,
they caught them in that area on a couple of occasions. They are much better drilled than they used to be, and I expect them. It's been frustrating enough so far for them, but I expect them to come good against Italy and then give Ireland a right go in the last weekend.
That's a good final game actually. That one, looking forward to that contest. But the teams all in reasonable health. It's just there are gaps, as we were highlighting with the table, and you can kind of see them in points difference and points accrued. This week we alluded to them. There are 3 games on this weekend. We have starting off with Wales, France, that big one. I think that is on the Friday, is it, or are they all on the Saturday? No, that is on the. I think that's on the Friday.
That's on the Friday, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the Friday night game, as it was in the
tonight
as live as we release this. That's true. Then Italy and Scotland on the Saturday afternoon, followed by England and Ireland. Prime time for our game, which is worrying.
Well, our game's on the Sunday.
Oh, it's
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So prime
yeah.
time for Italy, Scotland, really. But Sunday at 12 is England, Ireland in Welford Road. England expecting a big win in that one.
And to be honest, Ireland expecting England to win. Yeah, they certainly are. I would love to see us get a few tries off against them. To be honest, that's my hope for the team. But it'll be a very changed side. I don't quite know what to expect other than the England powerhouse to roll through.
They're very nice to watch. They make total domination very watchable.
They make it pretty. That's true. They do run the ball around. They stick lovely passes, and their lines of running are impeccable.
Bit of a blow to the blow. Abby Dow, broken leg, hoping to get back in time for the World Cup. That's a
nasty
tough
injury.
one.
It's definitely a tough injury and a little time, but they are spoiled for choice. They do have enough depth that I think they'll be able to see through our challenge. Italy-Scotland is definitely a good contest down at the bottom of the table. I'm hopeful that Italy at home can muster something to challenge the Scots. I do think Scots probably are the slight favourites going in despite the home advantage for the Italians, but I think it's only slight. I think there's a good contest in that.
I think Scots to win that one. I think England to beat Ireland comfortably, and then Wales-France is interesting. I do think France to win, but I think that one to be maybe surprisingly tight. That'll be my call.
That'll be a good one. It'll be good to get a couple of good contests in it, even if our own charges may not be able to deliver. But you never know. Maybe they do. I'm hopeful that someone will stick it up to England or give them a scare at least. But that is the scenario up in the Women's Six Nations. It's definitely an interesting tournament. It is creeping towards that denouement that you were talking about when England faced this France team, and it's all kind of smoke and mirrors before then, because they're both rocking perfect records and looking night and day different from the other teams in the contest. So it's just that great game that we get to see, where it is like that's the height of women's rugby right now, is when those two teams collide, and it just remains to be seen. It's going to be a pretty picture.
But the game accelerating at a rate of knots. Can't wait for the World Cup this year.
That's
curious to see if anybody can close the gap with England. And,
I'm wondering what the Black Ferns are up to behind closed doors after their shellacking. They're defending champs coming in, and they're our hosts, so maybe they may bridge the gap a little bit. But
at the moment,
looks like England are growing.
Red hot favourites to cap off what has been an incredible little window for them with a World Cup. But all of that remains to be seen. That's what's upcoming. That's kind of your update on the Women's Six Nations, with those 3 games coming up this weekend, 3 games next weekend, and that'll wrap up that tournament ahead of the World Cup later in the year. But we're going to move on for now, and we're going to take a look at club footy, which has been going on in our absence. We just had over the last couple of weekends the Champions Cup round of 16, which
that's right.
was very, very exciting. The first kind of competitive double headers that you'd ever see. I mean, you occasionally got one when the championship sides were playing for promotion.
That was the only other time that I'd remember that being in the aggregate being in play. And actually, I was quite annoyed that it wasn't like in the stadium in the Aviva Stadium for the second leg, that they didn't have the aggregate up next to the actual score in the thing, because it's more relevant score in the second leg, you would think. But
nobody knew what to do because it was so different.
It's true.
I think it was a wildly successful endeavour. There were some great games, great contests. We're going to take a quick look through them all. We started with our own charges were the first up, so I guess we'll start as we mean to go on. Leinster beating Connacht, double scores in the end, 82-41 over the 2 legs.
That's right, yes. I think it started with a 26-21 away win in Connacht, which you were at actually.
I was, indeed,
going out in the Galway in a bit of wind and a bit more less favourable conditions.
The weather was fine.
It was okay.
It was lovely.
It was a lovely weekend in Galway. It was like a little bit of wind, but there was fair weather in both legs, to be honest, and both teams played pretty rugby, to be fair. Credit to Connacht, they came out storming in that opening stanza of it, and certainly they grabbed the opening try and knocked Leinster back on their heels, but as was kind of suspected over the 2 legs, Leinster's class kind of told, and in the Aviva Stadium leg, the Dublin leg, it was just like 1 or 2 moments went wrong in execution for Connacht in the first half, and that was enough to kind of scupper them, with Leinster being as clinical as they often are on that surface, in that pitch, in that stadium.
Exactly. The Aviva Stadium, those Leinster guys are so used to it. They run so well. It's an ongoing concern with the quarters to come and travelling away towards the tail end of the year. It's an ongoing concern for Leinster that trying to deliver the same crispness on offense away from home, away from that beautiful pitch in the Aviva Stadium, as it doesn't necessarily always translate. It didn't in Galway on that first game. True. They were run a little ragged. They were a little flat-footed. They didn't love the pitch. And Connacht played a great game for pretty much the whole contest. I thought both wingers, Porch and Mac Hansen, obviously just touches of class from those guys. Kept Leinster on their toes throughout. But Leinster in the second leg, even like
you can see the adjustments. Like Mac Hansen, anytime he got the ball, he had one great moment, but it was on his own line, drawing two defenders and getting an offload away. But he, like, his every touch was brilliant, and they should have found him in two instances where it could have been a try, but the ball never got to him in that kind of space that he needed, and whenever it did get to him and he tried to make something happen, Leinster were wired to it, and they also overworked Aki on the defence to the point where Henshaw shrugged him off, Ty Furlong shrugged him off. He had taken a knock earlier on, but it was just, you could see they were key men in the first leg, and Leinster did the homework and kind of took them out of the second.
Their top performers, Mac Hansen, Cian Prendergast and Bundy Aki, their top performers from the first leg were all targeted and kind of harassed in the second leg. Bundy Aki particularly, as you point out, ran over by Henshaw, ran over by Ty Furlong, and his card, which could have been a red card if they'd noted the head-to-head aspect of it, but was just a cheap late hit on Sexton from a frustrated man after he played so well the week before, and he outshone Ringrose and Henshaw. He got outclassed by them in Dublin, but obviously was put in that tough position of being the only
fulcrum defender,
top test international facing a team full of top test internationals who were all gunning for him.
It's true.
And he ended up kind of flapping around.
And even credit to Prendergast, he got a couple of steals in the second leg, but by and large, he was blitzed out of it. And
Leinster's back row, we're all over them. Josh van der Fleers just keeps getting better every week. Just looks very, very impressive. And what Leinster had in those games, at least, was just, and it's the blanket that Ireland have had and Leinster have had every time. Certainly Sexton and Gibson Park have been playing together. It's just this supreme confidence in their offence that no matter what happens in the opening stanza, once they can get a bit of phase play going and run their shape, very few, if any, defences can stop them. And that's going to be the philosophy on which they roll from here on out for the rest of the season, attacking from everywhere on the field. It was that way against Connacht. Great start for Connacht. Jack Carty's putting balls in behind Hugo Keenan. Leinster are all over the place, giving penalties away. They trail in the game, and then the first time they get their hands on the ball, they space out, run their shape, pick the right options, and away they go in scoring a try. And we have to mention the quality of James Lowe as well.
I think
six tries,
great his great
and one chalked off
just in the two legs. That's true. As well as a brace against Munster in the interim as well. Like he's in great form. His contribution to that Jameson Gibson Park one was great, because I was watching it in the stadium. He just started the phase. He was on the left touchline hugging it, and he just worked very hard to trail all the way across, create the extra man, and then decide through and feed his compatriot in Gibson Park. And with that, he earned the right to score the 4 tries that came later on in that contest, because he was just he was brilliant in his every touch. His work rate has increased hugely. His defence is great. He knows his way to the try line, no doubt about that. And Leinster looking in rude health, but obviously, given the slip up, not really a slip up, but the unfortunate scenario with COVID that had them have a walkover, sees them away from home in that last 16 legs. So that is, as you say, the concern is, can they match that pretty picture when they're in more of a bear pit out in Welford Road for one, which is a tighter pitch and a little bit more choppy, and certainly with a venomous crowd at their backs, it's going to be a tougher task. But Leinster definitely contenders, if not favourites, for the tournament as you're looking at it right now.
So far so perfect, relatively speaking, from Leinster. Then we travel over for an all-English affair, which certainly after leg 1 was everyone's least favourite contest of the whole thing. Bristol Bears against Sale Sharks. Leg 1 was a 10-9 win for Bristol that spent most of the game being 6-3 until Seni Radradra came on.
Decided that it deserved at least one highlight for the reel, and exactly. It did get exactly that. It was a good try. But the second leg, Sale managed to get the job done. 35-29 win out in Ashton Gate.
Incredible game. It was so dramatic.
Yeah, it was much better. It was again vindication for that two-legged thing, because that 10-9 is the kind of thing we have seen in years gone by. I know Exeter and Munster have done ones in other years that have been similar in only one-legged affairs, but with that it was kind of a chess match that they were kind of not willing to risk too much, because it was only the open leg, but also like a little inaccurate, and defences got on top then, and then the second leg just delivered in spades. It was drama. It opened up then, much like the second half of a rugby game can do. It just kind of expanded it out. So I thought this ended up being a great contest despite all those worries after leg 1. Sale, a good value for their win. Bristol, very frustrating. Both of these sides, a little frustrating to be honest, but Sale probably less so this season. Their defence is very, very good.
Well, Sale were the reason Sale are frustrating is because they were much better than Bristol, just in open play, and you could see it from the moment the second leg started, every interaction was being won by Sale. They have some phenomenal players up front. Lou de Jager, Akker van der Merwe. Akker van der Merwe is an incredible hooker. He could easily play Test rugby if South Africa weren't so
it's your pet theory of all those South Africans who aren't quite Springboks, and they are just mighty assets for any club team to be having, because they'll just their work rate and their power and physicality is phenomenal.
Absolutely. And then as soon as they become Springboks, they become much less of an asset for their club.
They're minding themselves for Springbok duty and
so
not
true.
rocking up. They're just in the gym in Toulon.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. The South Africans you want are the ones who are not quite at test level.
Nearly box.
Just a
little cheaper as well.
Still really hungry. Or at least like Cobus Reinach level, where you're not quite in the starting team yet. You still have a point to prove.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just thought they're like, in every interaction they were on top. They looked like they were going to run away and smoke them in Ashton Gate. And then obviously they come up with just a brain dead red card that opens the game up.
Almost cost them.
Indeed. And it was Aaron Reid, the winger, with just an appalling tackle, and their tackle height struggled throughout the game.
It's not just the game. They have a little bit of a track record for that. Yeah. Their defence is tigerish and whatnot, but sometimes the body height is a bit suspect.
Play with a bit more sort of that old school macho energy and a little less technique in what they're doing.
Yeah, and it serves them well in large part, but sometimes they struggle to put sequences together and unpick teams, and then without an error.
They struggle just to put points on the board. Yeah. The crucial point in this leg was the 2 minutes either side at half time, just Akker van der Merwe's try off the maul at the end of the half, and then off the restart, Manu Tuolangi gathering the kick, and they score within 12 seconds of the second half.
Phenomenal start to that half.
That was huge for a team that struggles to score as much as they do. To get a cheap try like that was just massive, and it was well taken as well.
True.
Lovely, went through the hands really nicely. But then they got a yellow card and went down to 13, and only then were Bristol able to find the edge and impose themselves in the game and make it compelling.
Bristol quite disappointing in this campaign, and just in this season in general. It hasn't really fallen for them. Where once they were quite exciting to watch, and like definitely just with the intent that they played with, now they are just more frustrating than exciting.
They've kind of been figured out. Like,
they haven't adapted
at
all, because it was too lateral even at the business end of the last couple of seasons, and they haven't really kicked on yet, which is a shame, because I still root for them. I root for the Pat Lam project. I actually like both of these teams. I think Sanderson's doing a great job as well in Sale, but they're both not quite the finished article, and I don't expect that Sale will be challenging at the real top end, but they are got to be in it to win it, and they did manage to get through, and they are in that last 8 now, so credit is due to Sale Sharks for that. They won that one well, despite the adversity of a red card and then a yellow to be overcoming.
And then Morahan sneaking in there with that
Morahan
late
knows
try,
his way to
making
the try line as well. He's a very good winger. But yes, those congratulations to Sale. They got out of that tight contest, but then there was an even tighter contest as well. This time an England v France affair that really did deliver in spades. Harlequins 59, Montpellier 60 over the 2 legs, a 1 point difference, and that wasn't the only time that happened. But the opening leg out in Montpellier was a comfortable 40 points to 26 win, giving them a 14 point cushion coming to the stoop, which you thought might have been insurmountable for a lot of teams, but Quins, with their attacking pedigree, really from the opening bell in the second leg showed their intent to do it. They were just, let's make a shootout and let's try and win it, and boy oh boy did they come close. 33-20 in that second leg, man. Just 13 points, and it came down to a kick that could have gone one way or the other, but for the boot of Marcus Smith at the end. And it's like, it's a shame that's the headline, because actually his worldy of a setup for that great try from Danny Kerr keeping the kick in, and then going coast to coast. Marchant, I think touched absolutely brilliant, and his fingerprints were all over that second leg in terms of the margin they did manage to create, but that clutch kick at the end. Yeah, it was a curious one, and he's usually very clutch in terms of digging Quins out. I mean, they were made to pay ultimately for just their general looseness. They were just a little too loose in this game throughout. And certainly the opening contest out in Montpellier, they were definitely worse on that affair. They managed that so poorly, and they were so unwise going out there, and they can be quite an unwise team, still quite young. Yeah. But I mean, they went 34-0 down, and that probably isn't their biggest regret of the whole time. Yeah. And they had so many opportunities to win this. They were good enough to win it, and they are exciting. I think everyone loves to watch them. But the little cross kick for the opening try out in Montpellier, that's when they look back on as just ridiculously cheap. Then when they got back into that game, they started scoring some great tries.
they pushed it for one more phase when they probably didn't need to. They'd done enough to get back within 10 points or whatever it was, and actually gave up 3 points to Montpellier right at the tail end of that game, which proved crucial.
They all proved costly in the end.
The big one was the scrum, the sequence of scrums with about 20 to go, when they were just one score, 7 points to take the lead in the tie, and there was a sequence of scrums on Montpellier's line. Montpellier end up getting a card. They go back to a scrum. They scrummage again. They scrummage again. And I gotta say, it was like it was frustrating refereeing as much as it was everything else.
Yeah.
Because the Montpellier scrum half, like they had a yellow card. They had a yellow card. Montpellier. The Quinn scrum was moving forward. And they must have given them about 6 or 7 penalties, and every single time the hand went out for the advantage from our boy Adam Mikeson, and every single time the scrum half ran around the scrum, passed the ball offside, kicked it out of the scrum, picked it out of the scrum, grabbed the scrum half, grabbed the number. My least favourite play in rugby, should be completely banned. I just hate it.
I just think you're a flanker.
I just think it's rubbish. I just think it's absolute nonsense, because there's nothing you can do. And they don't ref the offside line fairly. Like the offside line's supposed to be the ball. These scrum halves are just running around the back of scrums. Yes. And the other thing that irks me is that it invariably punishes a scrum that's going forward.
Yes.
And they get away with it. But anyway, on every single engage, when they're winning penalties at the scrum, the scrum half is running around, killing the advantage, killing the play. And not once did the ref even look at him. He didn't get penalised once. They got 1 yellow card. It should have resulted in a penalty try yellow card. So it was Montpellier really did get away with one there. They got away with one in this whole tie, to be honest with you.
I think that's one that I think Brian O'Driscoll has cited, and a few others, is that like when the team is under advantage already in the red zone, and then you just kill the play with another cynical foul, that should be without warning a straight yellow offence.
Yeah.
It should be like foul play, because it is foul play. Like, you're already under advantage. If they concede another penalty, it's not necessarily a card if it's like an offside or something, or if it's marginal. But if, like you say, the scrum half just belies the offside line, runs beelines for the ball and kicks it out just so he can kill the advantage and go again, because he knows he's not going to be carded. It should be an automatic card, I think, that in that circumstance.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't looked at in that regard by Mikeson, because probably because he doesn't like things going quickly. He'd rather reset the scrum. But that was definitely fortuitous.
It was also, Montpellier. To be fair, it was mismanaged by Quins as well. At a certain point during that sequence, they should have just abandoned the scrum, even though they were in the ascendancy, just gone and found the try, and they ended up finding it 10 minutes later in a different set, and it was a great sequence from Marcus Smith, as he often does, to dig them out, and they get the easy enough kick just about 15 metres out.
Yeah, it should have been made.
Should have slotted and won the game.
Nothing else to be said. Really, it should have been made.
They're such a young team as well. Once he missed that kick, they just, from the whole energy instantly sucked out of the stadium. Like, there was just an audible just silence, and the team's body language dropped, and they had 3 minutes to make something happen and made nothing happen.
It looked more likely that Montpellier were going to ice it with a point in that last little stanza. But
what I will say about Montpellier is they are a different team with Cobus Reinach and Cobus Reinach only played the first 40 minutes of this, and that was the one where they absolutely hosed them. Like, they have some speed, they can pick some good lines. It doesn't really work without Reinach. Reinach looking like one of the top scrum halves in the rugby in the world at the moment. Excellent front runner for perhaps the Springbok 9 jersey.
Probably on form. Should be on form, just given Faf's kind of patchy form, and he's been in and out with injury as well.
Looks awesome. Looks awesome. The way he's moving them around, and they are a very threatening team when they have him on the pitch. In the 9 shirt, without him there, they struggle to get things moving as well. But they still have some quality. Villans was very good. They'll look back on some sloppy moments as well, letting Quins back into the game, but they'll no doubt be
they're happy enough to be navigating this tournament very expertly, with the benefit of the 5 points they got from us on COVID things,
which they would never have gone. Well, I mean, they happened to be in the tournament, but they were good value, because this was probably the tie of the round.
It was.
So
fair play to Montpellier. 60 points to 59 over 2 rounds. Great stuff, going down to the wire in the final, and this is exactly what the two-legged affair is meant to deliver. And cross thing, England v France, there was all great colour to it, and Montpellier good value for the win. Quins with a few harsh lessons learned, which is, they're not the first team to come through and win the Premiership and then come through and kind of not quite have it happen in Europe the season after or so, and they still have a few corners to be knocked off them, but they're on the right track. They're playing a great game. Quins, they're definitely great value in this tournament and in any tournament. They're just great to watch. They make for great exciting contests like these, so they'll be back, but Montpellier roll on, and we'll roll on as well, because there was another contest slightly less free-flowing and pretty, and certainly less high-scoring, but Munster v Exeter, as we predicted, quite a hard-nosed kind of physical battle that it was kind of like a staring contest after the first leg as well, but Munster came out on top 34-23 overall after an impressive 26-10 win on home soil in Thomond Park, after holding Exeter to a 13-8 victory out in Sandy Park, which was very similar to some of the contests.
Very Munster.
It was kind of classic. It was classic European pedigree versus kind of like Exeter have a star now. They did win one, but it's just the old school nous of Munster paying off in these two legs. Even though the two legs is kind of a new dynamic, that innate kind of understanding of these tournaments and what it means to escape Sandy Park with only a 5-point deficit and bring them back to Thomond, it made all the difference.
Well, I mean, absolutely it did. But for me, the story, from just a stylistic point of view, it's about two things, and the two things that matched up against each other. Exeter's offense, which to me, I was never a fan of it.
No.
But
it's less tenable now with the ceiling laws.
New laws around the breakdown, defences having adjusted. It's one note, it's one dimensional, it's not making things happen, and their ball protection at the ruck has fallen way off and probably didn't meet the same challenges in the years where they won trophies that they're meeting now.
True.
And then that's the flip side of it was Munster's awesome defence. Peter O'Mahony with
the Munster back row, particularly Peter O'Mahony, but the whole back row just out in that Thomond leg, that was the main difference, was that breakdown, and that back row was just all
how much better are Munster with Hodnett in there than Clote?
Hodnett was awesome. I can't understand, he's popped up a few times in the mid-season and been really good as well, but I can't understand the loyalty to Clote, who's
leaving at the end of the season, not showing you the same
loyalty. Not a Munster man anyway, is a penalty machine, is not wholly disciplined. Hodnett looks like their number 7
Clote
from my eye.
doesn't start a big game for Munster ever again. I think now Hodnett is the guy after that. But that was the story of the game. Exeter just kept turning the ball over. Munster just kept getting it, gobbling them up, and they're one note.
Eventually, Munster did find the try, as they do in Thomond. Their own offense is a little one note sometimes as well. Is a little bit not quite as sharp as it should be, but a couple of big moments.
Simon
Zebo, great touch for that as well. Dylan India grabbing the score. To be fair to Joey Carberry, excellently taken try as well. That little stutter step, spotted the mismatch with the forward in front of him and did his little bit of kind of bunny hop footwork that we do know so well. It was great to see him take it to the line and grow a bit in confidence in that game. Kicked very well in windy conditions as well, did Joey. They were comfortably better than Exeter over the two legs, and particularly in that decisive leg. It was a deserved win for Munster.
It's never quite as bad as they say. I don't think they're winning any trophies.
And it's
this
never
year,
quite as good as they've been kind of blowing their own horn in the wake of that. But you're right to point out, Exeter have struggled a bit this season with the wake of the new laws, which was kind of predicted when those new kind of breakdown officiate. They kind of looked like anti-Exeter laws that they were bringing in initially, because it was just that exact offense of going around the ruck, pick and jam, and the ref only ever blowing for offside against the defense was a trend for ages, where it's they are sealing and every other ruck and someone's diving in on top. So
I gotta be honest, my hot take, which I don't know how popular or unpopular it would be, but my hot take has always been that Exeter side is one of the worst teams to ever win a Champions Cup. I was like, really? These guys? Crazy. I mean, it was crazy to me. But fair dues to them. They went and they got it done, but I couldn't believe it. I thought any other year, when you get a Saracens or a Toulouse or a Leinster at their best, blow that team away. I don't think that they're matching up against the best sides ever to win the competition or close to it.
Well, they're not even matching up to that standard anymore. That particular Exeter team were better than this Exeter team that we have this season, and that's been telling in the Premiership as well. They've been struggling to kind of recapture that dominance.
Baxter needs to have a think about what he's trying to do with this team.
Whereas Munster did manage to put a performance in that was very Munster-esque in their own way as well. It was exactly what the fans kind of needed. It was good to see Thomond Park in good pomp and in good kind of voice, and they roll on. They have a great storied history with this competition, and now they do roll on to that Final Four. Bigger, tougher tasks do await for them, but they got to be in it to win it, so they'll be very, very pleased.
Absolutely. The next game that we had was La Rochelle Bordeaux, which coming into this game I didn't quite know what to expect. I thought maybe Bordeaux, they've been building nicely and they've been
higher than them in the top couture's standings, but
and they obviously had their pedigree from last year, making a semi-final, and I thought, who knows, maybe Bordeaux, it's their time. But Ronan O'Gara's Chargers had other ideas, and actually they, to be fair, looked to be back to their best.
Blew them away, so they did. They scored 31 in both legs, 31 in each leg for 62 total. 62 to 36 for Bordeaux, and it was all it was already over after leg one in Bordeaux, where La Rochelle just put the metal down,
put the hammer down.
31 to what was it, 13.
It was the speedy, free-flowing, offloading team that did so well last year. They were back. They've been stuttering a bit this year. They've been struggling for identity.
Had a few guys come back into the fold in terms of personnel. Big.
Dante is the big one. Dante's just looks. He's in awesome form. Like just coming out from that Grand Slam winning team, just with all kinds of good juju sprinkled over him.
He's grown in confidence over the last kind of year to 18 months. His star has just risen, and he looks a really, really well-rounded 12 right now. And they have other units like Aldred, who's in like a constant work rate for them. The halfbacks went really well in this contest as well, moved them about really well. Antonio, awesome. Although that could be a concern for them, is that he did take a knock, didn't he? And it may not be available. There is a little gap week now, but
there's gap 2 weeks. You never know. He could be back.
He could be fine.
Antonio and Skelton is big with Aldred. They have some quality all over that forward pack. Victor Vito in there is no mug either. But Dante in there, like this time last year, it was Bottia in that role in the 12 shirt doing an unbelievable job, and you would have thought very difficult to unseat. But Dante's more use, but Dante has the better reading of the game than Bottia does. He's just as physical. He's breaking as many tackles, explosive. But he's also finding the excellent passes at the end of those sequences.
That French camp will serve you well when you're playing at 12 with them.
And to be fair to Carbarlo and West, they look as in sync and good in terms of maintaining the tempo and width as they've ever looked.
It has been their best halfback pairing. Though, you're right in saying that they're maybe not the finished article entirely at halfback, but they definitely look no better than when they have those two Kiwi lads.
Police on coming on and getting carded wasn't that encouraging.
That didn't help with that particular duel that they have at 10.
But they'll be a threat.
They will. Dark horses for sure.
Raymond Rule.
His form is he has been fostered so well under Ronan O'Gara. He might be like Ronan O'Gara's best success at La Rochelle was just the management of Raymond Rule, who looked a little loose and did his Springbok career kind of was over before it started in that particularly terrible Springbok team. He was kind of ostracised along with a fair few other personnel from that, and so he was right to just kind of seek his fortune elsewhere. But he's become a much more rounded player. His defence is like night and day. He's a very physical, very game, very smart defender, but also just as keen as he can play 13. He has done during the season for them, as well as being slotting out more naturally on the wing. Very useful operator for them, and a good sign of man management from Ronan O'Gara. Because there was some kind of tabloid stuff with Ronan O'Gara getting slapped by the Boreas in the couple of weeks before when they met in the top tours in a tighter game out in Bordeaux. But all of that was feeding into the preamble, but it actually, as soon as the teams took the field in the opening leg, this looked a foregone conclusion.
Bordeaux did not handle the speed, and they upped it for Europe, which is very encouraging from the Ronan O'Gara point of view. And when you look at the side of the draw they're in, they'll be absolutely right in the mix. I'd say come the end of the season, they're possibly front runners for the final. Then moving on, we had Leicester Clermont, which had the potential to be an interesting fixture and was for 40 minutes since 10-all
at half time in leg one, but then that was it for Clermont at home. They couldn't score in the second half, and you could just see by the age profile of their team, even looking across, you're going like, and like a lot of guys who are going to struggle in the second half in games against monster teams like Leicester Tigers, and so it was. They ended up blowing it out to a 29-10 win away from home, and that was kind of all she wrote. And coming back to Welford Road, they only won the second by a 10-point margin, 27-17, but it was just an arm's length kind of comfy showing from them. A little bit of pride and defiance from Clermont in the end, but nowhere near the quality that Leicester are bringing.
They're so good, Leicester. They're they were always from minute one they've looked like the real deal.
They have. They've rediscovered themselves after some dogged kind of tumultuous years, getting down as low as I think 10th or was it 11th was their lowest finish in the Premiership that I think I've ever seen. That was a couple of years ago. And since then, the renaissance is real, and guys like Freddie Stewart, awesome finds, who just secure their backfield in a very Leicester Tigers kind of way. He's in that mould. He's big, he's strong, he's great in the air.
They're all great in the air. Harry Potter, magician.
He's been weaving some magic, so he has.
He is a fabulous player in the air, but they're wonderful because they're so Leicester. This is a group of young English.
We're all constantly talking about identity in teams, and clubs particularly do need to kind of go into their own history and identity. And Leicester have a storied one and a pedigree in Europe, like we were alluding to with Munster. It saw Munster through in that Exeter thing. Leicester have a ways to go. They have 2 stars themselves, and they're hunting a third, and they'll fancy it because they know what it takes, and they're comfy in their position in the Premiership atop the table, so they can go full at this, go full hog.
They absolutely will, but they obviously have Ellis Genge and Julian Montoya, who are
huge for
fabulous players.
Awesome.
Their set piece is magic as a result of that, and that definitely carries them along part of the way through. But some of the understated youngsters like Tommy Reffel, like a really lovely player at number 7. I love what they're doing with their centres, be it like whoever it is they throw in there, whether it's Kelly or Scott or Maroney, they can all catch pass. They all see the shape really well. They run a lovely system that uses the whole width of the field, and George Ford moves them around nicely. And their passing is always so clean, and they just take tries. They're very, very clinical wherever they are in the field. And if they're up against a team who are matching them physically, which is rare enough when they're in the red zone, they have no bones about stretching the field and moving it across to the width, and they usually take tries.
Yes, they do.
Very impressive team. Unflappable, brilliant in the air.
Certainly not by
Dangerous.
Claremont. They may be flappable at the business end. It remains to be seen.
I don't think they're flappable. They might be beatable, but I don't think they're flappable. They just keep going.
They were comfortably Menvy boys against Claremont, to be honest. It looked a different contest in that regard, and so it was. You can kind of predict that going in. Claremont are a bit of a shadow of their former selves, and
they're in the top couture in that kind of mix for the barrage, and like a lot of these top couture teams, you look at Montpellier rising high over Quins. Like even this time last year, you saw all the top couture teams edging it against their rivals. To be so dominant out in France, there's something very impressive. It's different.
Like impressive all season.
There's very few other teams, maybe Leinster, no other teams outside of France who are just going up to Claremont and doing that easy.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was very good showing, and it did. Yeah, it meant there was very little suspense in that second leg, and it meant that they could kind of coast in that second leg. They took a few guys off at half time even as well, so it was all just kind of cozy and shake hands. And then it did have that other feel to the second legs where it was just like a training game for the last 20 minutes where they were like, we'll try and score a try, we'll throw the ball around. Like the foregone conclusion of the result, everyone had already reached acceptance. Leicester go rolling on, and they do keep home advantage. They're going to welcome ourselves down there. That'll be some game. But yes, there was a tighter affair in an Irish FIFA and what is it, an Irish France or a Celtic France kind of clash. Ulster and Toulouse played out a bit of a humdinger. 2 away wins in this particular head-to-head, but and when the dust settled, Ulster were with 59 points and Toulouse 60, just out of reach. 1 point margin yet again. Ulster winning the opening leg 26-20 out, a famous win out in Toulouse. Granted, there was a red card early doors for the Argentinian in the ranks. Was
Juan Cruz
Malia, is it right, for a very reckless shot in the air. Completely right red card, but it meant that Ulster were probably going to win that game, but Toulouse showed again that pedigree, that they have not got 5 stars in their jersey for no reason, even though the last 16 is a new dynamic. They knew the importance of it, and they finished that first leg the stronger. They finished with a try that got it back to 6, and then they finished hammering the line, nearly getting that win. And then a 7-point win, 30 points to 23 out in Ulster. No red cards this time, and the class did kind of show. But it was kind of the class of their defence kind of showed more so than their offence did stutter in both legs, to be honest. They haven't quite looked their fluid best in this tournament just yet.
No, but they've been trying all sorts at centre, be it like Zach Holmes, and this week it was Peter Aki and Tim Nanai Williams. They have not figured out those centre
jerseys. Williams did not go very well. It's one of the worst showings I've seen from him. He got gobbled up by Hume and McCluskey for the most part.
The young lad LaBelle got injured, and out came on Tauzan, the other young lad who also really struggled. And it wasn't anywhere near as fluid. You got Ramos trying his best and Entomac trying his best, and when Entomac and Dupont are combining, it's very good. And as you rightly point out, their capacity to dig out a clutch score, as they did with Dupont.
Yeah, Dupont getting his obligatory score, which was broke the Ulster hearts.
Was very impressive. But I mean, for the most part, Ulster contended really well with them. We're on top of them, and I think it's a story. In terms of that second leg, it's a story of Ulster as much as it's a story of Toulouse, although you're right to point out that defence was a big factor in this, and guys like Michael Lowry and Robert Balakoon, who were so good in that first leg,
the same purchase at
hunted
all.
down.
Actually, McElroy had a great game, because they were watching those other two, and McElroy kind of had a bit more free rein and grabbed a nice brace, didn't he? And he was looking very good.
They definitely liked the look of Lowry in France. Like, there were gasps in Toulouse every time he touched the ball. He was having amazing moments, himself and Balakoon, and it was definitely catching the eye. They looked fabulous at times, and I'm very excited about those two. They're going to go and play for Ireland this summer, I'm sure, out in New Zealand, and that'll be very, very intriguing to see. But in the second leg, every time they got the ball, they were hounded out. Toulouse were ready for them. They'd done their homework. And conversely, Ulster just tightened up a little bit in that second half. They played a good
first half. They played a really good first half, and then they just they stopped playing.
Sat on a 6-point lead. It's textbook. Don't do that.
You gotta go and seize the day and go and win it. If you're gonna do it at all, and they
remarkable lack of clutch. Like, they just do not know how to win big games. Ulster, and
it's come to that business end of the season. These April fixtures, when the Ulster team don't quite look as formidable as they had done in November and December.
In moments, but then they you can see, I think I've put a one way before, where you can see them realising their situation and just not handling it well. In this case, it wasn't an example of crazed panic, but it was an example of them tightening up.
They just tightened up and started kicking the ball to Toulouse pointlessly, aimlessly.
They were doing fine, but it was just drip, 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 and then in the end, it was Tom O'Toole and Rob Herring, really the two of them, who came in with that high shot on Challenge.
Terrible shot. I'm amazed that
it wasn't two red cards.
Just two red cards. Could have walked. It was like, for my money, actually, the second one, the Herring one, that the ref managed to dubiously chalk down to like a change of angle. Like, even though the last movement after the contact was Herring tucking the shoulder and hitting him in the head, which it looked more vicious than the kind of clumsy tight head.
They were both clear reds. The ref just didn't know how to make that decision, but it should have been Ulster down to 13 and game over. But as it was Ulster down to 14 and game over.
Yes,
because Toulouse, with the man advantage, were able to find that try. But Ulster, I mean, they did it to themselves. They really did it to themselves in the foot. They was there to be won
in both instances, because they should have closed out that. They should have had a bigger margin than 6 after that red card game in Toulouse, but they also kind of tightened up in the tail end of that and allowed Toulouse to kind of come back at them and get the crowd back involved. And then similarly at the business end of the second leg, it was Toulouse's clutch and class seeing them through, where Ulster's the opposite of that, kind of coming unstuck. It was a tale of both teams, to be honest. You could see both of their pedigree, and for better or worse, and it's just unfortunate. Ulster one point
difference that feels like a mile difference.
It is a mile difference, and it's like no reward for their great play in the pool stages to be getting a Toulouse in the draw. Certainly they can feel aggrieved at that,
but then they could have had a tougher team. They could have had a game against a team in better form, and to be honest, like that was still there for them. They could have won it and they didn't, so they've no one but themselves to blame.
It's true. It's bitterly disappointing, as is the mantra, it seems, for Ulster Rugby. It is quite unfortunate.
Yes, but, I mean, Dan McFarland's doing bits. They're doing great work, but they're going to have to overcome that mental hurdle if they're ever going to make the step up to winning trophies.
True.
Then the final game, just to round up the round of 16, was the Parisian Derby. They put us to sleep in the opening leg. It was a 22-9 away win, which looked to put the tie to bed. The stat that emerged from that was that there were no line breaks.
Yes,
it was all penalties, and then one pick and jam try at the tail end for Racing
stuff.
And then the second game was definitely more interesting. It was quite sloppy, but you saw Racing breaking out from their own line. Finn Russell, a beautiful little scything line break, and then he goes for a grubber kick through. And to be fair, the little halfback from Stade hooked him, got his foot just on his backswing and hooked his foot, like you'd see in hurling over here. It was perfect, and then Finn fresh airs it, and Toulouse Voyanu picks it up and runs it in.
That was great stuff.
James Hall, it was the scrum half for Stade. It's super little play, that kind of went unnoticed on the broadcast, but it was fabulous, and it was great to see Stad take an early lead. They were 15-3 up. It was Scooby-Dooby as stuff from Racing. They were kind of loose and all over the place.
Some beach footy, but they were comfortably a bit superior to them. I
think they were going to win the game anyway. Yeah. I think you're right, but I mean, your man Naivalu coming up with 2 yellow cards, and the second one could have been a straight red anyway.
The team looked sick of him as well when he was doing that.
Yeah, and Tolulatu the week before coming in with his 8th card of the season.
That's right.
I do like Quesada and what he's doing with this Racing team, but these Argentinian linked teams and their cards, I mean, that one from Naivalu on the weekend, the second one, which was in the act after a beautiful piece of play from Russell, and they're going in to score, and he just comes in and flies in and hits the guy in the head really badly, and it could have been a red card. And then you had that extraordinary scene of the Stad captain shouting at the ref after he gave the card, like, oh no, like screaming at him, and it was like, you could walk as well, and you're wrong. And like, what are they teaching these guys in Stad, where they think that they can get away with just smacking a guy in the head? Like, you can't. Sorry, they're like they're in the ancient times, Stad, so they kind of did it to themselves. And that said, we did it towards the tail end of that game, get to see some pretty Racing rugby. And
it opened up a little bit.
They're good Racing. They need to be less sloppy, but their weapon is the fact that they have so many quality players that they can just find tries. Like Teddy Tomac can just find a try from anywhere,
and they have such quality with guys like Fiku pulling the strings. Imov is still just a diamond of a winger.
He gets some great assists. Does Imov?
He's a great player. He's always been a great player, and guys like Beale to come back in as well. They're definitely a danger, but I suspect, as I've often suspected with Racing, that it's just the kind of Galacticos syndrome. I'm not sure if their work rate is quite high enough to get them through this cauldron, this gauntlet of a tournament unscathed. I think they might come there. I think they will come unstuck against one of the big teams at some point. But that's my perhaps
unless they just find loads of tries,
and that is their avenue, and they are more likely than some other teams for that great capacity to just be next play and attack the space, which is definitely a good trait. But yeah, so that secured the final four, 55-31 I think the margin was in that Racing, Parisian derby overall. So yeah, comfortable kind of arm's length distance between the teams, and the right team getting through. And so yeah, that leaves the final four, and actually we already have final eight I should say, and we already have those quarterfinal draws as well. So it is first up Toulouse and Munster in Thomond Park. That's going to be, I think, the Saturday 7th of May, 3:00 kickoff, and then our own charges out in Welford Road, Leicester v Leinster. That's a 5:30 kickoff on the Saturday, and then slightly later 6:30 I think, 7:30 kind of our time, but 6:30 local time, La Rochelle versus Montpellier out in France, the all French affair, and kind of on the Sunday game we have Racing hosting Sale Sharks in an interesting contest as well. That's at 4:00 on Sunday the 8th of May.
They're all interesting. I mean, the two either side of it are similar. Munster Toulouse and Racing Sale. The non-French side, like the defence versus offence, very much so. And
true.
I think Munster Toulouse is interesting in that way. You saw what they did against Exeter on the defensive breakdown.
The home advantage definitely is a good tilt for Munster, although they have decided they're going to play that in the Aviva Stadium incorrectly.
I have heard today that they're trying to push tickets at €20 a ticket, which is definitely good to try and fill the stands. But it's a constant bugbear of ours when you think of the GAA stadiums that they have out there in Munster. There are some cauldron atmospheres that they could have brought it to. Obviously the Ed Sheeran blunder is what it is. I have sympathy with Munster.
For those who don't know, Thomond Park is unavailable that weekend because Ed Sheeran is playing there, which is obviously just a clanger.
Indeed. They made a decision with the best available information they had at the time that when he booked that stadium, there was no inclination
it was only quarterfinal footy, so they naturally weren't going to be.
They didn't think there would be quarterfinals in mid-May or in early May. They thought this is business end of the season. There might be semi-finals, finals at this stage. The whole calendar has changed, and this was booked way out in advance. So it's easy to say with hindsight, but the bigger problem for me is just that you can't. That is only rugby stadiums can play rugby matches, and football stadiums for football matches, and GAA stadiums for GAA matches. It just drives me crazy. Munster has some fabulous stadiums. In Munster they have 3 45,000 seat stadiums that they could go to instead of the Aviva. They have Semple Stadium in Tipperary, Porky Queeve in Cork, the Gaelic Grounds in Limerick.
Yeah,
they could go. They all hold
stadiums.
about 45,000. They have other stadiums like Walsh Park in Waterford, which has less of a capacity, but could be like a raucous place to go to. And well, like just maximising your home advantage, bringing it to a new ground like Porky Queeve. Obviously, I'm not sure what the GA situation is. Maybe it's booked up, but it doesn't even look like they looked into potentially using it as a host venue, because there are so many Cork players in this Munster team now. I think you'd get a raucous atmosphere. So yeah, I definitely think they missed a trick.
They did. And then the other factor is like we were highlighting Leicester, and the other one, Leicester versus Leinster. Welford Road is a tight pitch. It's a bit of a boggy kind of. Well, it's a better surface than the likes of the Rec, but you know it's a little choppy. Scrums can churn up.
The small in-goal
and the narrow pitch. It's not as wide as other pitches.
When you look at James Lowe's kicking style, and you right away think of are you
ball
using
going
James
dead.
Lowe to exit?
Exactly.
It could be dangerous.
It's a risk. That's it. But it's a devil that they know, and they're going to have the whole crowd in behind them, and it's just a really good advantage that they're going to have over Leinster, and that'll make for a very interesting contest itself. And it feels like Munster are definitely missing a trick bringing Toulouse there, because the clean surface in the Aviva, that'll benefit Toulouse just on a pure rugby kind of basis. That'll benefit Toulouse more than Munster.
It's a lovely surface for attacking rugby. But that said, Munster, their defence against Exeter was incredible. They're obviously going to be posed greater challenges, but Toulouse's offence is stuttering at the moment, and if that dynamic continues into this game, Toulouse could be found vulnerable to the onslaught of defensive turnovers that Munster can produce.
Yeah,
and we know Munster have the odd try in them if they can get downfield. There's definitely scope for a Munster victory there.
It's a bit of a European classic, is it? Yeah. Not Munster v Toulouse. It's got all kinds of pedigree. 7 stars into this contest.
Yes,
and it's that's pretty good.
There's a funny dynamic about the sides of the draw. There's 13 stars on one side of the draw and none on the other.
Yeah, it is an oddity, all right.
But that Munster-Toulouse game will be interesting. The instinct tells you that Toulouse will be the team to find the try that decides it in a tight one. That's what the instinct tells you. But the other possibility is Munster dominating that breakdown area and getting the better of it.
Maybe Toulouse not being quite as good. I don't think Toulouse have looked quite as imperious as they did last year, no doubt.
It's the Arnold brothers holding them together. If they can dominate the tight areas with those deceptively good second rowers, that could be a game changer for them.
Yeah.
Then Leinster is the tie of the round. I mean, who's going to win that?
Toss a coin. It's great. Leicester with the home advantage and top of the Premiership.
Game worthy of a final.
Both sides sitting pretty atop their respective divisions, like sitting very pretty, like not going to be caught, such that they can go all guns blazing for this European campaign. Yeah, it's another European classic, this time with 6 stars involved, but the pedigree is there. It's 2 teams with need no introduction, and it's just going to be exciting.
Little signs in those Clermont games, little signs where if Clermont had been a little cleaner in the past, you could see them opening them up on the edge. Yeah. Leinster, if they can get their offence right, there are tries out there for them, and Leinster's defence is formidable enough that it'll be interesting.
Rematch of Genge and Furlong. That's going to be. Are we going to have our locks back? We've been without locks.
James Ryan's back apparently.
Hope so. Yeah. Hopefully we'll see both sides locked and loaded, and just a great European kind of game that you'd expect. Welford Road, one of the great stadiums. Great to see Leicester back at the business end of this tournament. They have such a part to play in it. It's not been the same, the English challenge, without the Leicester Tigers involved. So they're well worthy of their spot in the Final Four. And rocking home advantage. I'm fearful of them, but bring them on, says me.
Absolutely. The other game, which bizarrely clashes with Leinster. I mean, from a TV point of view, it's that's a sad thing, really.
Well, I think it's 2 hours apart, isn't it? Because it's actually, I think that it's local time kickoff, that isn't it?
Oh dear, no. They kick off at exactly the same time. France are an hour ahead, not an hour behind.
No. I was more in hope than any expectation.
No, I mean they're kicking off at exactly the same time. Which when there are 4 matches on a weekend, obviously there isn't if you're better off getting bums on seat, there isn't the broadcast appetite to watch all 4, which is a shame for the tournament. I mean, you'd think with a tournament of this pedigree, getting separate kickoff times so that people can watch all of the games would make sense, but apparently not. So that is a shame, but La Rochelle Montpellier is still a juicy fixture.
It's a very good fixture.
Not really doubting La Rochelle at this stage, though.
At home as well.
Rodgers' European determination.
It would take a serious Rhinoc showing. It would take a serious Montpellier showing to unstick them in Europe, methinks.
Yeah, they would certainly need Rhinoc.
It would take their best ever European showing, to be honest. I haven't seen the kind of performance you'd expect it'll take to get rid of La Rochelle. I haven't seen that ever from a Montpellier team.
That Ronan O'Gara feels like they've unfinished business in this competition. They have a very decent looking run to the final here against teams they know.
The other side of it, Ronan O'Gara is a guy with European pedigree, and he values this tournament. The Irish always do look up to this as the pinnacle. This is the one you want to win. Montpellier have not always shown that instinct, and the fact
in this year they haven't shown that instinct.
And the fact that they are in such contention and in such a good place in the top tours towards the tail end, you get the sense that Philippe Saint-André would prefer Bouclier to a Star. Whereas I don't get that impression from Ronan O'Gara at all.
The quality of players, the speed that they were playing at, they look like they're peaking at the right time, La Rochelle. So I'd be confident of them doing the job. Although
if Reinach is really good,
gets his form back,
this is it. And if La Rochelle are a little bit stuttery or in their own way sometimes to start, which they can, sometimes pressure tells that way when you over focus on it. Then balls just don't go to hand.
Willems against Skelton, there's a matchup. So there's some meaty collisions in that one.
The whole back row units are big as well, and it's going to be a physical one for sure. I expect La Rochelle to have the slight edge, but definitely an interesting all French affair. And then the Sunday game as well, the U Arena, the hosting Sale Sharks. Classic offense v defense. I mean, Sale Sharks have built themselves on a tigerish or a sharkish defense, but Racing just love in that clean surface in that U Arena, love to run the ball around, love to find the space.
The problem for Sale is I think they can dominate this game. They could probably dominate this game for 70 of the 80 minutes and lose it.
Yeah,
that's the sad thing.
It's always the risk. It's like it was the equation we were talking about with Argentina last year when they were defending really, really well. It's just that they were defending for 90% of the contest.
The hope is that the defense generates points. They do have a proactive defense. So there's turnovers. There's
the game they won against Scarlets last year is kind of the model of how they would like to beat Racing. Now it's
just turnovers. If Racing are going to run the ball from their own half, getting the jackal steals and the 3-pointers. But generating turnovers through interceptions, through breakdown penalties. That's their
man and ball smashes and all of that.
Maybe a successul maul
tackle height down.
All of that.
But against it
with Teddy Thomas, Finn Russell, and
the track that it is, which the U Arena,
they just take a try from anywhere. That was it.
Very, very tough.
Last week it was just there was a ball that would bounce off the ground, but Finn Russell pick it up, see someone just fling the ball perfectly out to that guy, and then they get a one-on-one matchup. And these backs they have are so good 1v1 that's all it takes, and Sale probably won't cope with that.
I can't imagine they will. I just think their capacity to find scores will be found out a little bit in the Euro.
Possibly even their defence will be outmatched by what is at its best a very good offence.
I think they will defend very well for large periods of the game, but I just don't think you can just do that and expect to get through.
Racing at their best with Russell and Fiku can open up the best of
defences. Holding Racing to around 28 points can be the sign of a very good defensive showing. Even conceding 4 tries, they are that good at picking you apart. So you've got to have something firing on the offensive end as well, and that's where I feel Sale may struggle. But that is the picture in the final 4 or final 8, I should say, the quarter final. We've got to this more normal stage through the new avenue of the round of 16, which we are proponents of on this podcast. It remains to be seen. It may disappear again next year briefly because of the possible abridged season with the World Cup and all of that. But I would like to see this remain as a kind of thing.
On balance, it's a little better than the old pool structure. I know the pool structure is a mess with the 12 teams.
The pool could give a little bit of rejig, and I'm not sure if the pool structure is something.
The reality was towards the tail end of those pool games, you had complete dead rubber games where people were just rounds 5 and 6 routine rather than being dramatic. Were routinely dead rubbers, more so than this last 16 was. This last 16 was more dramatic than what rounds 5 and 6 were, and in effect that's what it's doing.
Well, the Ulster Toulouse and the Quins Montpellier contests kind of showed the virtue in it.
There's always a double header. There used to be a double header in the group stage around Christmas time. The problem with that one was very often teams would trade 4-1s and shake hands on both occasions. This time there has to be a winner of the double header. I just prefer it. I know the groups are a little messy, but I think most of the problems with they might have to rejig the format a little bit because it's just sometimes it's just not fair if you have a team that's non-competitive that's just going to give you a bunch of points and then you get to be top seed as a result of that. They're going to have to look at how the seedings work.
The COVID 28-0 have skewed it a little as well.
For you can't play two teams to decide your seeding and then have that be so determinative as decide whether you get home quarters and semis. It's wild. Like that. That's wild. And like Leinster are feeling the injustice of the COVID situation, but it would be equally unjust if the COVID situation didn't happen and they got to stuff Montpellier, who picked a B team again, and then off the back of beating, who was it, Montpellier and Bath? Was that Leinster's two teams? A Montpellier team that was throwing the competition, actively tanking games, and a Bath team that couldn't string two passes together. That would give Leinster a home path to the final would be equally unjust. So they are, from a format point of view, they're going to have to look at the seedings, but I do love the round 16 and I think it's definitely better that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But it's nice to have the business end home interview in this great tournament, and like 8 great teams remaining, 4 French, 2 English, 2 Irish is the makeup of it. And all well represented. Anyone could win it. It is anyone's game. But really excited for those not coming up until the 7th of May, so a couple of weeks break for all the teams to kind of take stock, and obviously a few more fixtures to fulfill for them all in the meantime. But that is kind of the main show in club footy right now. It's such a great tournament, and it's great when it arrives at this kind of time of the year.
Do you know what? This time next year we're going to have South Africans in it. Yeah, it's mouth-wateringly good. I love it. It's becoming the Champions League that it always kind of promised to be, and always was. Like it's a sensation, and some of these teams are fabulous, and our boys Leinster are right in the mix.
True.
And really looking forward to the crescendo of it now over the coming weeks. There's obviously a couple more weeks of league seasons, then you got quarters straight into semi-finals, gap week straight into finals, the business end. I think as good as club rugby gets.
That definitely is.
So it's a very, very exciting run in with some great teams. So I'm loving it. Loving European rugby.
And in other European rugby news, we also have the final 8 in the Challenge Cup. We arrived at it through a different route. There were no rounds of 16. It was just a slightly protracted.
There was a round of 16.
There was a round of 16.
One-legged
round of 16, I should say. And yes, through that, after the dust had settled, then there were 8. They're going to be played alongside the same weekend as the Champions Cup, as is tradition. But first up we have Gloucester v Saracens in an all-English clash on the Friday, then Edinburgh hosting Wasps on Saturday, Lyon v Glasgow also on the Saturday, and then Toulon v London Irish on the Sunday. Those are the quarterfinals. Some
good teams in there, some good games. I think
Lyon Glasgow could be pretty.
Glasgow could be pretty, and it'll be interesting. That's probably the best game of the round. And Toulon London Irish is interesting too, but whether London Irish might put it up to a disinterested Toulon in the Felix May All is definitely intriguing. Yeah. I think Edinburgh and Saracens to win the other one and set up that semi-final. I think Saracens strong favourites for
Saracens,
the tournament.
Very strong.
They were put up to it by Cardiff last.
They always play a little there's like a mini El Clasico that happens anytime Cardiff and Saris meet, and
it's a high-scoring game that's won by Saracens.
It is, but it's very pretty to watch, and it has been for the last few seasons when it's happened. But
Owen Farrell out the back pass for Leylandstrom was nice.
No, he's doing his England credentials, no harm. And
the little sabbaticals, I know he was injured, but the long breaks do sometimes help these older guys.
You don't need to play every week.
Brilliant for a year now, Farrell.
He could, which is they want him for the World Cup to do exactly that. So it could all come good, and Saracens do look like they're going to do due diligence by this and win the tournament. It's always like when you're a team that's a fish out of water in this tournament, which has happened. It's happened to Leinster in that season of 2013, was it, where we lost that double header over Christmas to Claremont and ended up getting bumped into the B League and winning it rightly as like they were proper contenders. They were probably good enough team to be in the final 8 or final 4 of Europe. It was only that they met a really good Claremont team who were also good enough in the pool stages, and then once they're in there, just hose through it. That's kind of looks like what Saris are set to do in this thing. They look like proper European contenders.
They'll be back next year, back in the mix, and that'll be great for English rugby to have. It's just so good for English rugby to have Leicester back, but to have Leicester and Saracens back will be different.
Much bigger pool to work from in terms of just that England identity. I think it's important. So definitely it's heating up. It always is a good competition. I like the way it runs side by side. It often serves as curtain raisers. The kickoff times don't quite overlap, so it's kind of nice to have this kind of like it's slightly less intense, but like a lot of the teams are very, very good, and a lot of the games end up being very dramatic and very good in this. And yeah, it's always a good spectacle, the Challenge Cup as well.
Absolutely. But listen, with that kind of parks the European rugby that's been going on over the last few weeks. So we'll leave that there. Definitely looking forward to the crescendo of them, particularly the Champions Cup. But for now, that parks us, and we're going to move on. But as European rugby parks for the next couple of weeks, so returns the domestic leagues. So we're going to take a quick look at all three of the main leagues in Europe, starting with the Top 14s in France, just checking in on where we were ahead of those that break for the last couple of weeks in Europe. Montpellier do top the table, surprising all as it seems. They've accrued the most points, 14 wins from 22 games. Pretty in impressive form as well, with plenty of talent returning. They hold off Bordeaux. They're 5 points clear of Bordeaux, who in turn are 5 points clear of La Rochelle.
That's right, yeah.
Tied on 58 points, La Rochelle with Cast. Just a point further back is Toulouse, then a point further back from them, Racing. That's the top six at the moment, and from the outside looking in is Lyon, who are on a bad run of form at the moment, but they're just 2 points off the barrage positions. Clermont just 3 points off the barrage positions. Toulon just 5 points off the barrage positions, and then Pau a further 2 points back, looking like a long way back for Pau.
With only
There's
a few games
4 games left in the season, so
a lot of distance to make up.
Things that have to go very right. Stade have probably left it too late as well. Brive obviously fighting relegation down there more so than anything else, but it does look like Perpignan and Biarritz will be the bottom two.
It does look that way.
So yeah, things starting to take shape.
Yep, definitely. And a few good juicy games coming up this weekend. Cast Clermont is one with a lot of kind of playoff permutations. And,
if Cast can get the win there, they'll be one foot in already. Really.
Conversely, if Clermont can get that win, an unlikely win, that could bolster them up and slingshot them into the playoff spot.
Likewise, Toulon Toulouse. If Toulon were to get the win over Toulouse out there in Felix Mayol, Toulouse would be right in the mire, and Toulon would be on the march from relegation to barrage. It has been done before in the top 14s.
It has been done. There's also a top of the table clash on the Sunday as Montpellier host Bordeaux. That's set to be a very, very good game. Bordeaux now out of their European campaign, so it'll be all guns blazing at this one would think. So potentially a very good game.
Montpellier out in spirit.
Yeah, they're third. They're still in it.
They don't
to
care.
win it.
They don't care.
So some good games. Other kind of more one-sided mismatches like Racing hosting Biarritz and such. But Brive Lyon could be a good game. Stade v Pau could be a good game as well. So a few good contests this weekend in the top 14s. It is getting towards that crunch time now, and the barrage is the main kind of focus. It's that race for the top 6, which is always very exciting.
Yeah, and the top 8 as well. Top 8 for European qualification is very important. Toulon on the outside looking in at the moment. Clermont could be pipped to the post there, and just imagine Clermont not qualifying for Europe.
I could.
That would be a damn shame for them.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is the situation with the top 14s. Just to check in also on the URC, the United Rugby Championship.
Yeah.
Things are quite juicy actually, in the absence of the rest of the teams playing. There were a couple of games over the last couple of weeks. There's a couple of South African derbies. The Sharks got a very big win over the Lions that kind of elevated them out of range of difficulty. The Stormers had a good win in a tight game against the Bulls. They're on a big win streak at the moment.
Scarlets had a tough L that completely quashed their chances of squeaking into the last 8, and so ended the Welsh Challenge, really. All things bar the Welsh Shield are kind of gone for the Welsh clubs now as of last week.
The Scarlets, they are 5 points off the Bulls. I mean, it is still technically possible for them to pull it back.
It is.
It just seems very unlikely at this stage,
especially given the home loss to Dragons, which was kind of a layup with the game in hand.
Exactly. They had a great run in against a domestic opposition, and to lose that one at home against the Dragons, they were down to 13 early doors. They were very flapped. And the Dragons played a good game.
They did. The Dragons do have a little bit of spirit in them in that regard, but very unfortunate campaign for the Welsh. But that top 8 is looking almost fixed in place now. The possible Scarlet spanner in the works, but it's looking like the 3 Irish teams, the 3 South African teams, and the 2 Scottish teams are the ones who are going to be doing battle in the postseason here.
That's right. But there's quite a bit of jostling for position to be done within that. I mean,
Munster are on the precipice of either they're at home in Thomond and everything's dandy, or they're travelling down to Cape Town probably.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of this weekend, depending on how results go, Munster could be anywhere from 2nd to 8th.
Yeah, and they are still fighting on two fronts, and they will be prioritising Europe as well. So that opens the door a little for the South African teams who've been going from strength to strength with their home matches going very much to plan, and it's allowed them to kind of crawl their way back up after the tough start of to the campaign while the Rugby Europe Championship is going on.
The story of the year continues to be the Stormers. I mean, after being in that position where they were, nearly going into administration, and Khaleesi was heading out the door, and Kitsoff was thinking about heading out the door, and I think they lost a couple of other players as well. But now they've got the band back together. They've got everybody fit. They've got Warwick Gallant and Damien Willemsen looking super
very, very good.
They just look in flying shape, and more so than the Sharks, who've lost their captain Am, and the Bulls, who are hot and cold. The Stormers are the most consistent team, and they're also the team that's playing the most exciting brand of footy of all the SAFA teams. Some of the tries they're putting together are breathtaking. They're definitely the story of the competition at the moment. But it's all up in the air as to who finishes where. Leinster with a bit of a cushion, but Leinster's next 2 weeks are going to be spent out in South Africa, and they've already picked a very weakened side for that, so you would expect them to come back towards the pack, if anything, hoping for losing bonus points, really going out there.
Hoping to find a few players find a bit of form and whatnot, but it is definitely a weakened team. That starts this weekend. Obviously some good fixtures coming up, a full host of fixtures. The Stormers, the aforementioned Stormers, are hosting the Glasgow Warriors. That's a good kind of pre-playoff kind of thing. Those two teams will definitely be involved.
If Stormers win that, they move into home
field,
and
then you'll have one of those SAFA teams bringing them down to the cauldron. That would be good. Ulster hosting Munster as well. Both sides kind of already secure enough in their position in post-season. Home quarterfinal is the one, and Munster will be desperate to try and steal points and secure that. Edinburgh hosting Zebra as well. They'll be looking to just add another win and keep ticking along.
Nice one to have on the rotation.
Bulls hosting Benetton. That will probably be a bit of a revenge mission for the Bulls, one might think, after Rainbow Cup disappointments. Then the Dragons hosting Scarlets in an all-Welsh affair. The rematch. Scarlets will be desperate to win that.
They need 5 points. They can't afford to slip up again. It has to be 5-5-5 for them in their last 3 games.
They got to hope for some help. Lions hosting Connacht in a game that won't matter in the postseason, but could be very, very pretty. Because both of these sides like to throw the ball around. They're up at altitude. Could be a bit of fun. Then Sharks v Leinster. That's the one that we're looking forward to the most. That's a very, very interesting one up in Natal. I'm excited to see how our kids go.
If the Sharks and the Stormers both get wins, that will necessitate a defeat for Glasgow, and potentially Munster could lose as well to Ulster. And even if Munster don't, Ulster, one of those teams has to lose. You can potentially see the Sharks and the Stormers leaping up into that top 4, getting that home quarterfinal.
So we're getting towards the jostling point of that season. And the only other game is Cardiff hosting Ospreys in an all-Welsh affair that isn't going to impact things in the postseason at all. But definitely some good fixtures worth watching. It's been a very entertaining tournament. It's been so much better than the tail end of the Pro 14 for the last few years, despite the fact that Leinster were winning those competitions.
It's a breath of fresh air.
I think every team feels like the standards improved, and you can see that in things like Edinburgh's campaign in the other tournament, in things like Munster getting farther, getting through their last 16 and stuff. I think the general standard is better than it has been because of the injection of the South African teams.
And I think everyone in the top 8 has a legit goal to win the competition.
Indeed. So it's definitely a new dynamic, and excited for it. And who knows how many South African semi-finals or quarterfinals we're going to see. Could be
it's
very
an exciting prospect, isn't it? Just to look at the Premiership as well. Obviously Leicester out in front on top. They're 8 points clear of Saracens. So actually, Leinster, they were clearer than that before. They were Leinster are 10 points clear of their nearest rivals in their league.
It's still those two looking very comfy. Then 68 points for Harlequins, and then 62 for Exeter makes up the current top 4. Back on 58, Northampton still in with a shout. They are riding a 3-win streak. So a bit of form.
They have a game in hand.
They do have a game in hand as well, so there's potential for them to jump in. Sale a little further back on 56. Still in the mix,
hunt,
definitely. Gloucester also on 55, is it? Also in the hunt, and then probably a bit too much separation. Then 53
that's
for
the
London
race for
Irish.
Europe again. Race for 8th in Europe is tight between London Irish, Wasps, and one of those sides is going to miss out. Bristol are way back
Bristol
on 10th.
have been wedged in 10th place for the whole season, and it seems like they're set to stay there.
And Bath, with a couple of games in hand on Worcester, could end up usurping them and not finishing bottom after the tumultuous season that was. But it doesn't matter at all
for the Rec faithful. But there's no relegation this season, so it doesn't really matter. It is just those top 4. And to be fair, though, that top 4, top 8 as well. But the top 4 have kind of held firm despite a little bit of pushback. It's kind of stayed the same for the last few weeks. But yeah, teams like Northampton, like Sale, still with realistic aspirations of reining them in and sneaking into the postseason.
Well, there's a couple of big games this week. Exeter are travelling to London to play Saracens. If they lose that game,
door left open.
Yeah, I mean they're only playing 24 games in the year. They'll have 2 games left.
Yeah,
and Northampton will be right behind them. Northampton play Bath this week. Great opportunity if they can get 5 points out of that game and Exeter lose. They will usurp Exeter in the top 4, and they'll have a game in hand on them.
Yeah, Sale do have a bye this week, so they aren't going to be able to rein them in just yet. But Gloucester, away at Ashton Gate, which is far from a fortress these days, Gloucester might fancy their chances out there.
Absolutely. It's all getting intriguing.
Northampton there in Bath, in the Rec, be able to, if Northampton can conquer the Rec, keep their campaign alive. Yeah, there's a lot of jostling to happen, but the top 2 and to be honest, the top 3, Quins, Sarries and Leicester will be there. Exeter probably will be. I'd say, but it's
what if they lose this week?
But it's
I don't know.
That's the one that's definitely up in the air. But really, really good tournament this year as well. A lot of teams doing really well. The renaissance of Leicester, the renaissance of Leicester, and the return of Sarries, colouring this as just a very dynamic new vibrancy to the tournament, and it has kind of knocked back kind of pretenders like Bristol from last season have fallen way back in their wake, and the standard is pretty high, and two of their teams have made it to the business end of Europe as well, but this is a carrot all of its own, and they'll all have serious aspirations about making it to the postseason and then securing it in the postseason.
Absolutely, and then we're going to take a look as well. We're not quite done with European rugby, because there's been another club tournament ongoing the last wee while, and that is the Rugby Europe Super Cup, which this past weekend had its semi-finals. Yes, and they were some humdingers. The Lusitanos of Portugal beat the Tel Aviv Heat 42-26. They came back from behind. They were 26, I think, to 21 down, but found a few tries.
Yeah, managed to kick into a good gear. They can rattle off some great scores.
Marta 13. They had your man Pinto at fullback, was just cutting through them.
Yeah, the spine of that attacking kind of weapon that is the Portugal team, and with a bone to pick now. They'll Appleton be determined.
I mean, they were lovely
to take home some silverware for this season after the disappointment of the World Cup campaign, but they're playing some great stuff.
They are playing some joyous stuff. It was another beautiful game. And then the Black Lion versus the Spanish team, the Iberians, what a game that was. 43-40 it finished. Both sides taking tries from everywhere. I mean, it was helter-skelter stuff. There were some lovely scores on both sides. Sharik Hadza had a nice cutting line for a try. Kamaladze had a great weaving run for a try, to be fair to him, and also gave up one on the other end. I mean, it was
an open game.
It was
43-40.
Defence is struggling, but I mean, some lovely offence, and I'm really enjoying how much at both test and club level these club sides are taking tries from anywhere. And the skill level is just night and day different.
The Rugby Europe institution has just changed fairly seismically over the last few years, and it tees up a very good final. Lusitanos v Black Lion, Portugal v Georgia. We had that in the opening game of the Rugby Europe thing at the big boys, the international thing, and it ended honours even, and it was a great game, compelling game. So hopefully more of the same.
Yeah, and this one's out in Lisbon, because
it is in Lisbon. The reverse of that. So the final date, I think it's the 7th of May that's going to be played at 3:00 local kickoff or 2:00 UTC. That's going to be out in Lisbon in Portugal. Yeah. So home advantage. Hopefully a dry track with a bit of heat in the sun. Hopefully some high scoring razzle dazzle rugby to wrap up this season. And good as we were rooting for with this Rugby Europe Super Cup, they are getting a season done. Obviously they've had rearrangements. Obviously things have had to be chopped and changed with the Russia situation, but I'm glad that they've arrived now. We have a final, we have a date, we have a venue, it's going to be played, and we'll have a champion then, and that'll be it'll be great to.
By the way, one of the things that they talked about at the announcement of the tournament that has gone quiet since was doing a deal with the EPCR, and they should absolutely do that, where the winning team of this tournament gets into the Challenge Cup.
Yeah, it would be great.
They absolutely should do that. I mean, they've had NSISTM have played in the Challenge Cup. Connacht have had to go out into Siberia to play them before.
True.
Getting a proper one of these teams, these are a cut above that.
Yeah.
So to see the winning team of this go into the Challenge Cup and just create that regular season bridge between Tier 2 and Tier 1 in at least that competition,
it would just
would
the
be
stepping
brilliant.
stone to bigger and better things.
Then all of a sudden, who
them,
knows, maybe they'll get a win over a Top Couture's team that's disinterested, and then all of a sudden you got momentum. The Black Lion have been touring. They've been playing in the Curry Cup second division the last couple of weeks, so that's a part of their dialed outness, I think, in that game against the Iberians has to do with the fact that they had to do more travel for their home game.
That's right,
because they were based out in South Africa. They had to fly up to play their home game, and now they're flying back out to South Africa to continue playing in that competition all the way up to the final, when they'll fly up to Portugal.
It's a long
so
travel.
busy men,
busy Black Lion men,
they're unbeaten throughout all of that.
So obviously something agrees with them. They're tough books, but really, really good final. Two deserving teams, and hopefully just get it in the books and be excited for this tournament to roll on. And as you say,
put both of them in the Challenge Cup. The Lusitanos and the Black Lion would be such good value in the pool stages of the Challenge Cup next year. Because some of those Portuguese guys, you never know. You just never know. Zebra, do you think really? Or, I don't know.
They might cut Zebra open, so they might.
Certainly for a phase or two at least. Maybe
indeed.
More.
Definitely worthwhile pursuing that. But the first step is, as we say, just get through the season, get a champion, get the trophy lifted, get off underway. And it's been really, really good for all the teams concerned, and it's helped, no doubt, with the great rugby we saw at Rugby Europe in the international level. These teams performing at the club level has improved all of those sides no end. So more of that for sure. We are going to pivot on and just look further afield as well. Club rugby all around the world. We're going to start in the US with the MLR, which has rolled on. A few things have happened in our absence. New England Free Jacks look the imperious side of the bunch, riding in, I think, 8-1 record so far, including just a massive win streak. They're top of the Eastern Conference with Rugby ATL, 2 points adrift behind them. Then Toronto Arrows have managed to scrape up into the playoff position after a rough start.
They play some fun rugby.
They do, and they've knocked New York just outside in the Eastern Conference. In the Western Conference, then the Guiltinis have recovered after a rough start, and they are currently riding a 5+ win streak. They're up in second on 33. Austin Gilgronis up on 38, are top of that conference, with San Diego Legion on 28, currently making up the playoff picture. But Houston Sabercats and Seattle Seawolves both 1 point adrift of them, so that Western Conference is
it's
very competitive. Also, Old Glory DC did manage to get a win last week. They got their first win,
right.
so now
there
is now only one winless team remaining. It is the unfortunate Dallas Jackals, who are the new team this year. They have yet to get a W, but the rest of the teams have all taken a scalp, which is a good sign.
And it just doesn't fall for them, but they are getting pumped every week, unfortunately, the Jackals. But sure, look, learnings
as they say,
here, but a very enjoyable comp, and I'm looking forward to the playoffs that'll be upcoming in due course as well. Mostly
through 10 rounds. A few teams have only played 9, but most of them have played 10, so they're getting through a lot of work. And it does heat up. It is available on the Rugby Network to watch free, so do check it out. It is always really, really good coverage and really fun games as well. A lot of really good competitive teams.
Absolutely. And then in the Japanese league, which has been ongoing as well, it's kind of a tale of 6 teams.
It is rather, it's 6 of the 12 team comp. It's a tale of the 6 at the top. Suntory are the kings of the regular season. They are riding a massive win streak. They've only lost one game. They're 56, but they can't quite manage the Wild Knights. That was their one loss, and it was their loss in the final. The Wild Knights themselves have dropped a couple of games. I think 2 games themselves, and they're on 48 points in third. Kubota Spears up a second on 49. Cannon Eagles then on 41. That makes up the playoff picture at the minute. But Toshiba Brave Lupus on 39 and Toyota Verblitz on 36 could still reckon in the postseason. Down at the bottom then, Shining Arcs, Red Hurricanes and Green Rockets are struggling. Green Rockets in particular riding a massive loss streak, and it's looking like a struggle for them. So those 3 are probably going to be into those playoffs, which are a new thing this season in the new format, that they'll be playing off with teams at the lower league to keep their place. Interesting dynamic, but it is a tale of two halves of this table. Like some of these teams are not quite like the others.
Yeah, some crazy games as well. There was a game the other week that was 71-41. It's just
good fun.
Quite a bit of entertaining rugby and basketball. Not too much in the way of intense defence.
Yeah, although Latanu has gone out there now more recently, so that could change.
Well, yeah, maybe he's definitely swimming against the current on that one though. Yeah. Then also we should mention the SLAR, the Super League Americana de Rugby, going on in South America. Yeah. Unfortunately, not watchable up here. They have no interest in broadcasting. They don't need us. No. But it's being watched down there, and it's much more compelling. It seems.
It is. The draft system seems to be working. The Jaguares have lost not one but two games, which is just totally unprecedented and shocking. They're currently in second because Penarol have only lost the one, and they're up on top. But all the teams have managed a win apart from the Cobras, who have been struggling.
Yes.
But that'll probably remedy itself next season if it rolls on. If you thinking of the draft system, because we've seen it already in action, and it's a really, really good competitive kind of thing. They have now switched venue up to Montevideo, where they're going to finish the tournament out in Uruguay. But a fair few more games to be played. Really, really good to see this tournament grow legs. Like we were talking about the Rugby Europe Championship, we were highlighting this when it was in its inception. They tried to get it done. The season was interrupted because COVID. It was all up in the air as to whether it would even hit the ground running at all. But now this season has been much more competitive. Teams have been winning games again, taking scalps. They've been all more competitive.
The league's taken a more reasonable shape.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just exciting to see it keep rolling on, and we'll keep you abreast of it as best as we can.
Great for the development of Southern Hemisphere and South American
huge
rugby.
For the development of things. We saw even with it's been more recently things like Colombia making it far in the playoffs and stuff. We've seen these teams that we wouldn't normally think of as a traditional hotbed kind of improve, as well as teams like Uruguay and teams like Argentina just kind of still always in the mix and always in the hunt. And the Uruguay's improvement has been stark and great, and Montevideo has become a little bit of a kind of a mecca for South American rugby, which is great. And I'm excited for this tournament to keep rolling on. It is a shame that they don't broadcast it.
Yes, we're left with highlights to garner what happened, and there are some fun highlights, but I'm sure the games are better than all that. But that said, one competition we do get to watch in its entirety is Super Rugby Pasifika,
that's right,
which has been ongoing, and we've just reached now this week. We're heading into kind of the second half, the second stanza of the season.
It was all up in the air as far as scheduling because it was all COVID, spinning plates and whatnot. But we are going to see some Trans-Tasman games finally after the opening stint of both conferences.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's really interesting to see how this Trans-Tasman stuff is going to go. I mean, personally, I it's always hard to gauge, but I don't think that the standard of the kind of Aotearoa, the New Zealand competition, has been what it was in terms of just the sheer magnitude, the sheer speed of play and quality of skills that you'd sometimes see in that competition, where sides are just scoring from everywhere. It's played at this crazy intensity and pace where you just feel that all of these teams are going to blow away the Aussie teams when they meet. I don't quite have that feeling this time around. I think
combination of the Aussie teams looking a bit tighter and a bit better, and certainly the Kiwi teams playing a little bit more kind of pragmatic football is one way to say it. There's a lot of sets where you're just seeing them go kind of lateral for a bit and then setting up box kicks in the middle third, and you're like,
they're not quite running it from everywhere like they once did. It's definitely it's
also, we did have a massive change, well, not quite a changing of the guard, I won't say just yet, with a regular season win, but a monkey off the back of the Blues, who did manage to get a W over the Crusaders
first win in Christchurch since 2004.
There you go, massive win for them, and they were good value for it. They were the better team that day by far, and the Crusaders a little sloppy in pretty much all areas, but the Blues did well to take it.
The Blues were more physical. They got on top of them up front. Guys like Kurt Eklund and Dalton Papali'i were fantastic,
really good,
and then they didn't make it count, and they did tighten up, and you could sense the nerves out of them.
Nearly nicked it.
Kind of Ulster / Scotland / one of these teams that just doesn't quite front up in the big moments, versus the Crusaders team that even when down and out will find a couple of seven race tries.
Playing absolute trash by their own standards, will still find a way to be in the last play.
But to be fair to Rico Ioane, what a tackle that was to ice the game.
He is so useful on the defense. To be honest, he covers the ground so well. But a fair few really, really good games in our absence as well.
But But meanwhile, in Australia, there's been interesting things going on. The Reds are interesting with Taniela Tupou. That game that they played against the Rebels, which was such a ding-dong battle, and the Rebels definitely looking much improved.
True.
Matt Phillip everywhere, roving, scoring tries, making tackles.
They're a little less depressing to look at than they were at the start of the season.
Yeah,
no doubt.
they're building quite nicely, and that was a great ding-dong battle, kind of typified by that Tate McDermott try when the Rebels broke up the left wing and looked like they were going to score themselves, and then Fraser McWright gets in, steals the ball, and then they move straight up the other end of the field, and McDermott ends up scoring. That was a little more what you'd associate with the New Zealand rugby. You think back to some of those Chiefs Highlanders games where it was just ding dong, ding dong. We haven't quite been getting that this year, so it's definitely intriguing. I'm curious to see how it goes. I think the Australian teams look more organised, more physical. The Waratahs look good, which is definitely encouraging.
That was night and day different than they were last season for sure. The Force look competitive, if a little shorter quality sometimes.
The gutting thing is that JOC has done himself an injury, a bad knee ligament injury that could potentially end his season. It's not a cruciate, but apparently it doesn't need surgery, but it's like
it needs
6-7
rest
weeks
and recovery, and might mean the business end of the Reds season could be without him. He'll be obviously focused on things like Bledisloe and the World Cups to come in the international kind of sphere, so that'll be what his recovery is based on. But that is a blow to the Reds, although not as big a blow as Tupou would be. Tupou is there as much as talismanic 10, but talismanic tight head. That's kind of what they're all about.
All of the games this weekend are being played in Melbourne. Curiously, in Amy Stadium is kind of, they're calling it some they have a name for it anyway. It's some kind of festival of rugby out in Melbourne this weekend. So they're playing all the Super Rugby games out there. There's going to be a protracted stint in Australia, and then the New Zealand sides will get to host them for some, I believe, towards the tail end of the season.
That was what they were musing on at the beginning of the season. Was they were thinking they were probably going to do something like that.
Kind of doing it in 3 stanzas. So at the moment, everybody's in Australia, and for this week, it's all in Melbourne. For the coming weeks, the Aussie teams will be hosting fixtures, and it is that same dynamic, unfortunately, for the Reds and the Brumbies, where it's coming thick and fast. It's a Kiwi team every week. But at the same time, we wonder how much that gap has bridged. I think the Waratahs Chiefs is an interesting game. That's today as we upload. It might be going on right now as you're watching, or it may have happened already. Big one to watch for sure. And then Hurricanes Reds, very curious to see what happens there. Julian Savia, by the way, has 2015 form reignited.
Great form.
Good to see.
Yeah, it is good to see.
He needs Boujalal out of his face and he can start doing bits.
That's true. It's amazing how Toulon works that way.
But Highlanders Brumbies as well. I mean, for Brumbies Reds and possibly even Waratahs, they'll look at those as potentially winnable games or potentially close games. And that's
the Rebels might not.
The Rebels no chance, no. The angry Crusaders from last week, they'll get hosed.
Yes.
And the Drua, unfortunately, will
probably fall to the Blues as well. Moana Pacifica Western Force is actually postponed. That was meant to be on this weekend. That would have been a good competitive game. Both
Force kind of struggling for form now.
Yeah, and both Pacific Island teams are actually riding 5 win or 5 loss streak at the minute. Having got a few scalps earlier in the season,
but Moana Pacifica, I think, would be thankful for the break from the Kiwi teams.
That's a little true.
To get on the board against the Aussie teams. But it is an unknown entity this year. I feel like it's closer than ever. I feel like Bledisloe is closer than ever too. I mean, maybe the All Blacks are about to come out with a vicious
maybe it's just wishful thinking.
But
it's like the year that we're going to the All Blacks.
Well, it does look and feel a little bit different. Like the All Blacks
they're definitely not playing quite the same way that they certainly were. But they still are the standard bearers in this competition. The Crusaders specifically, but also the Kiwi teams in general. So it remains to be seen. It is a big unknown as to what happens when those two when after watching them in isolation on either side of the Tasman, you're thinking there's definitely maybe there are ins, but then maybe there's just
I think scrummaging, like the intense scrummaging from the likes of Tupou that you're not necessarily
you don't
seeing
see it in the Kiwi division a lot of the time.
I'm very curious. We'll be more informed after this week, but I really don't, and you obviously egg on my face if I'm wrong, but I really don't feel like we're about to be looking at even all New Zealand
the Menvy
wins.
boys that we have been
or even all New Zealand
wins.
Seasons, I think I'd be confident in saying I think there'll be at least one Australian win this weekend. I think that will happen.
Okay,
but we'll see.
Bold claim. Who do you got? Let us know down below if that's crazy talk or dead on. I don't know. But some really good games. The Highlanders Brumbies is definitely one I'm interested in. Just in terms of there's definitely ins for that Brumbies set piece against that Highlanders.
For sure. I would think that matches up okay for the Brumbies, but maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, maybe
I'm wrong. But we should should also touch on, as well as all the club footy that's going on, there has been sevens. Glorious sevens. There was an event last week out in Vancouver, which is notable for its victor. Argentina won the competition in amidst the returning Fiji, the returning Samoa in more ways than one. They're not just back, but they're back and
better than ever,
which is great to see. I mean, they were a great team a couple of years back, but they'd fallen right off a cliff, and to see them just extraordinary. Like, I just clicked them on and they were playing Japan, and I kind of assumed, because they had like a low ranking next to their name, I was like, well, this is kind of one of those lower level things. And then it was like every single contact. They were like 26-0 up in 3 minutes, the Samoans. The Japanese couldn't tackle them. They're some extraordinary players in that team, and they're very exciting. Samoa, they made the semi-finals but got blown away by Fiji, who got blown away by Argentina and specifically
looking very, very good.
Marcus Moneta,
he's an awesome player,
just getting better, like somehow getting better, and he's got
next year in the 15 sphere.
He'll be there.
He'll be involved.
He looks like a potential superstar.
He does.
I don't know how high his ceiling is, but it looks very high.
That Puma Sevens outfit have been playing some tidy stuff for the last near 5 years, and they've been getting better and better. If I was Michael
Cheika, I'd be looking at them going,
I certainly would, because I'm looking at 15s and looking at their 7s.
Could use
one of these things is not like the other. Just pick that 7s team as a backline.
The kicking game out of them. They have changed the game with the kicking game. They'll kick the ball anywhere. The footballing skills out of them. They'll just run down the field dribbling the rugby ball. They're just they're
brilliant. I kind of enjoy to watch, apart from whenever we have to line up against them, because they have the Indian sign overs.
They're just much better.
They're just better. No, it's true.
The Ireland team that has 2 players in it.
It's sometimes not quite enough against these top level teams, but it's great to see teams like Fiji returning to the fold. Very, very exciting. The next
New Zealand as well.
Like business, they won last week. Missing them. The Springboks have been enjoying, or the Blitzboks, I should say, have been enjoying some supremacy in this, but not quite supremacy, because the Argentinians have been nipping at their heels. Did get them in the last one,
and they've suffered losses the last couple of weeks. They did end their week with a good win over New Zealand. But still, there are definitely
their
some
supremacy is not quite as like much as it was looking the last time they were in Vancouver, which was like last year, just as things were starting back up post Olympics, and it was like, are any of these teams going to be able to give South Africa a run for their money?
For a while, the answer was no. Long enough for them to have the series secured.
They do have the series secured, but it's a World Cup year, so they're all focused on that. The next full tournament with both men's and women's will be played in Toulouse. Actually, there's one in Langford, but that's going to be just the women's playing at the end of the month on the 30th. The 20th to the 22nd in Toulouse is the next full stage of this tournament, which does beg the question, as I was asking earlier on, why, if there is only one women's tournament on the 30th of April, do the Irish women have to leave the Six Nations camp? No good reason at all. The Irish women are actually, but as it stands in the women's game, if they're standing there, they're about 5th. They're doing fine.
But not winning, so it's very not crucial. But sure, listen, and sure look. That about parks everything that we kind of wanted to touch on for the show this week. Again, as we said, we're at the top of the show. No test footy at the moment. No major test footy going on. So we're kind of just checking in on the rugby world and touching base with everything that's going on. But we are going to wrap up, as we do, with the rugby news of the week. And I'm going to start just with a bit of news around the Six Nations for next year. So basically the fixtures have been announced. The headline really emerging from it is that Friday night games are done. After Wales failed to sell out on their Friday night fixture this year. It was always Wales who were getting them, and I think everyone was a bit jaded with them. I kind of didn't mind necessarily. I know it's kind of can be a pain for travelling fans, but to be honest with you, Sunday is as big a pain in a lot of cases. So I don't really see much of a muchness between one on Friday and one on Sunday. Kind of equally awkward.
Traditionalists will tell you there's a world of difference.
People who work, I guess, but the reality is you're kind of spoiling the Six Nations atmosphere when you have the game on a Sunday anyway, because people who don't want to take a day off work have to go home then. So it just is what it is. But they've gone back to the Saturday and Sunday, the tried and tested. And it opens with Wales, Ireland and Cardiff.
game.
And followed by England-Scotland opening the tournament for the third year in a row.
It's just that Calcutta Cup classic.
Scotland open against England, and their second game is against Wales again.
There's no way that they won't go 2-2 this time. This time they'll go 2-2 or 2-0. I should say 1-1 coming right up in whatever form, or 0-2.
Yeah, well, and their middle games against France away. So I mean, scary times for the Scots.
The Scots need to rally for sure.
I should also mention Joe Biden was throwing his hat into the ring for the World Cup bids of the US in 2031 and 2033, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
The men's and the women's. That's very exciting. They kind of did their formal bid launch. Definitely excited to see whether or not the US get those tournaments and how much kind of fanfare they can bring around it. Biden was throwing his hat in the ring anyway and saying you've all the assurances you can want from the government that we're going to throw our weight behind it and make it happen.
Well, that was encouraging. Money talks. That kind of bid could work, for sure. Yeah. Just big US money. That's exactly what World Rugby have been spoiling for. They definitely want them in the mix. So that could be interesting, and watch that space. In other news, slightly more provincial news. Obviously the Cheetahs, who everyone certainly in the URC everyone remembers fondly. Certainly,
yes.
In our neck of the woods, they actually were the bright light in that first little introduction of South African teams into the Pro 16 or Pro 14 as it was. They obviously got shafted in the more recent iteration of it and were left in kind of limbo. But then now they're kind of find a little backdoor deal. They're kind of going to enter into a type of URC B division, it seems. At the end
none of this is decided now, but it's kind of rumoured that yes, the URC are going to create a B division as part of their expansion, which is I'm interested to see what they come up with. It'll obviously involve the Cheetahs and the Southern Kings, but like, hey, why not a Georgian team? Why not a Zimbabwean team? Like, let's see. Portuguese team? I know this is this is the opposite of music to the ears of kind of begrudging Welsh fans who think that the league has gotten too big and it should just be more parochial. But I kind of love it. I'm very intrigued to see where the URC go. I definitely like, as much as you fear capital investment and the potential trappings of it, I definitely am enjoying the expansion of the competition and their attempts to kind of grow the game. Because it's
unequivocally been an improvement. The competition was trash. It really was. It was not good for quite a while. So it's definitely it has needed this revitalization, and if they keep wanting to build a bit more, then maybe having a B division with a relegation or a playoff or something in the postseason for that could be good fun. Like if you're telling me there's Cheetahs play Zebra tomorrow, I don't know if I'm back in Zebra. If it's to get back in for a season of footy, that could. Yeah,
could be good. I'd be very curious to see what the promotion relegation dynamics would be, and I'm obviously not sure. But just even to see it happen at all is just an indication that they're moving in interesting directions, which is no bad thing. A couple of Leinster retirements to kind of talk about. Sean O'Brien is going to retire at the end of the season. Obviously needs no introduction.
Tip of the cap to an absolute legend.
Is it too much to say he's one of the all-time greats? I mean, the Lions tour in 2017 was fairly opus. He won Six Nations in 2014, 2015. He was
European
MVP
Cups.
player for Leinster in 2011 when they won the European Cup. I mean, very, very impressive player at his best.
Used to say in his pomp, he'd just ignore the first tackle. That was all. Just ignore it and just carry on.
He was a savage. I mean, he won the respect of everybody. He was an extraordinary player and is an extraordinary player, but he's finishing up at the end of the year.
35 years is quite a good innings for someone who played the back row in such an attritional fashion. We remember Stephen Ferris, who was a big monster as well, but he retired very young because of just the toll it took on his body. But Sean O'Brien, Tullow Tank, is an absolute legend, and tip of the cap to him. He doesn't need to buy a pint in Leinster.
Absolutely. Legend that he is. And Sean Cronin as well, who's obviously mightn't be as high profile outside of Ireland, but was an absolute stalwart player for Leinster and Ireland. One of the great impact subs of the last decade.
To his chagrin, he always did want to grab the starting berth, but he was good use from the bench. He inject some good pace from the bench.
Deceptive acceleration of Sean Cronin. He was an awesome player.
A few great highlight reel tries when he just scorched past wingers who didn't quite expect the turn of heel from him that he had, but he was really good.
He'd be raging if I was Sean Cronin, I'd be raging I didn't snap up a deal with some French club a few years back, just as Kelleher and Sheehan and all these guys are coming through.
Sure, yeah.
But he's finishing up now at the end of the year anyway, and he has been just a brilliant player for Leinster and Ireland, so fair play to him.
Yeah.
Then just another story coming out of France, that basically a group of Toulon supporters have launched a petition to protest the departure at the end of the season of Louis Carbonell.
Yeah, it's funny.
Obviously, Carbonell is one of a very rare thing indeed, a homegrown Toulon player.
Others include the likes of Gaël Fickou, who you may remember from teams like Toulouse and Racing and not Toulon.
And Stade at one point. Obviously, the France Grand Slam winning team, possibly best player in the world right now, Gaël Fickou, who does not play for Toulon. Yeah. And so Toulon supporters understandably raging that they got rid of Carbonell, and he's off to Montpellier now apparently. Just an indication of a club not doing it quite right. I mean, geez, nurture your talent. They have a decent academy, but they just lean on their money. It's just
mercenaries. It's the only thing that's
millionaire assembled teams. That's the only thing that interests them.
Yeah, which is a shame. It's a great shame for someone like Carbonell, who no doubt wanted to take a bit of pride in it and be that home for. Well, certainly what the crux of the thing is. I think it's the supporters they're called the Minot de Mayol. They're a massive supporter group, much like the Leinster OLSC, the official supporters club or something, but taking exception to this as kind of a last straw thing. Well, to be honest, the results have not been good in the last few years. They did manage to buy 3 trophies in a row in that with those superstars. They looked out in managing to get in Johnny Wilkinson, a mercenary who would also be a massive an unrelenting taskmaster who'll drive professional standards throughout this team of mercenaries who don't really have a reason to care. So it was quite an unusual Galacticos formula that worked very well. But we've seen in other teams that it comes unstuck, and it is quite tiring to watch. And certainly things like Etzebeth's cameo for them this season that have got the chagrin of them, where it's like, is he playing for us? Every now and then he does, and he's pretty useful, but mostly he's just in the gym. Yeah. And it's like we spent how much on him, and we're letting our 23-year-old 10, who's from our neck of the woods, we're letting him go. It's tough. Certainly from Leinster, it would be impossible to support. We definitely don't do things that way at all. It's I understand the fans' chagrin with it. I know that it won't come to anything. The deal's already done. He's gone, but it is just nice of them to mark their protest officially with it, and because they're right.
Exactly. Try and change the culture of the club a little bit. Yeah. We're going to move on though to the women's game, where interesting story coming out of New Zealand that the Black Ferns head coach Glenn Moore has resigned. There were allegations that emerged last year, basically just from one of their players was saying that basically he was just a bit aggressive, and that he was overly critical, and she was basically saying that she nearly had a mental breakdown as a result of all of his kind of aggressiveness. And he's kind of denying those allegations, but basically is moving on from the coaching role. It's a tough one, but obviously probably informed a little bit by results. It's impossible. I would say it's a tough one just because it's impossible to comment without knowing the ins and outs of what went on, which is impossible to know.
Well, it's possible that they were also looking for a reason to rebuild after they're pretty shocking from their perspective. Like, it wasn't totally shocking from our perspective, but they were shocked in their European tour last year that they just got pumped twice by England and France, and they're way off the pace, as it turns out. And
if nothing else, those comments are an indication that the dressing room wasn't right.
Is fractious, and indeed. So
they also, interestingly enough, have brought in Wayne Smith and Graham Henry to help them with their World Cup campaign.
Are good heads.
Not sure if either of those will take the head coach job. It's possible.
They're going to just try and sprinkle some positive juju on it and try and improve them. They're trying to close the gap, is what they're doing. They're working behind closed doors to try and close that gap that was very, very evidently present between themselves and the big European powerhouses, and they're looking to get the sheds in order before they host the World Cup later in the year. So interesting developments in the Black Ferns behind the scenes there in New Zealand rugby.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have some disappointing news out of Italy/England that Callum Braley has announced his international retirement as he's leaving Benetton to go and play for Northampton, and the sort of resident qualified Englishman is now leaving the country and done playing for them internationally, which is
a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
Well, he's left on a high note. Maybe he's thought it's not getting any better than this, winning in Wales. But
I just don't love that really from Brayley. But what are you going to do? He's committed now to Northampton.
Yeah.
Then we also have interesting news as well coming out of Munster in Ireland, that French midfielder Antoine Frisch, who has been playing in Bristol, young player, very exciting. He's going to be joining Munster in the URC as a centre. Obviously Dale Indy leaving Munster
a big enough hole in their centre, a big Springbok shaped hole in their centre, but they're going to try and
fill it with a Frenchman. And this lad Frisch is potentially a top class player and is Irish qualified through his grandmother who's from Dublin. So that's
there you go.
An interesting one.
Can bypass the residency rules and whatnot and get straight into the mix if performances back it up. So that is the kind of signing you want to see from Munster. It's more savvy, it's more shrewd. It has
also just a Frenchman in the midfield is no bad thing.
That's actually could benefit them a lot. Or he could be a very frustrated man. It could go one or two ways. But definitely an interesting development there. A bit of a coup from them. He'll be leaving Ashton Gate, and then obviously we have to wrap up with some somewhat sad news as well. There were a few things in our absence that we had the former skipper of the Ukraine national team. He'd been killed. He was killed a few weeks ago at the age of 55. He was fighting for his country against the Russians. So that's obviously grievous, sad news. Just nothing.
Alexei Sibko was his name, and was a legend of Ukraine rugby, and unfortunately senselessly ended up having to fight in a war for no good reason at all, and died as a result. And that's terrible. Rugby is supposed to exist to make these things not happen in lieu of silly things like war. So terrible to see that happen, and just best wishes to all the people in Ukraine and his family, and hopefully things can come to an end soon, although it's very disappointing that they haven't even yet. Then also another sad news as well is that Tom Smith, I'm sure you guys heard as well, we haven't talked about Tom Smith yet, but he also died at the age of 50 a couple of weeks back after he was obviously diagnosed with colon cancer back in a couple of years back. A legend of the game by all accounts, just a brilliant character, and so just rest in peace to him. And we were remiss as well not to mention on the last show Gareth Mason, who you guys might know. He was a YouTube commenter on rugby and commentator on rugby, and just a sort of a larger than life personality. We didn't know him really, we hadn't engaged with him. I'd watched a few of his videos, but I loved his sort of infectious enthusiasm for the game, definitely. And he was definitely from our school of thinking of just trying to be positive and trying to bring goodness and joy into the world of rugby commentary, and the opposite of toxic. He was exactly. Seemingly a lovely guy, and it was kind of heartbreaking and harrowing to see that kind of news that you don't expect from someone young. It was just terrible to see. So RIP to G-Man, absolutely.
So somewhat somber note to wrap up the show, but it has to be said. Yes, RIP. Pay our respects to three legends of the game in different spheres, and just grievous sad news over the last few weeks that we've been absent.
The world could do without all this sad news, but unfortunately it does keep coming.
It's true.
But listen, it is a somber note to end the show on, but if you did enjoy the show, please do leave comments down below, engage with us if you want, if you have any thoughts on things we should cover. There is some brilliant rugby going on in the world of rugby. They've got the European wrap-ups and the Women's Six Nations, definitely the headlines at the moment. Super Rugby not far behind, and all of these tournaments reaching their crescendo over the next couple of weeks and months. So it is an exciting time. I know it's not the gap in the test window, but the crescendo of the club season is really,
always
really
get
exciting.
So excited. It's when summer rolls around. I don't know where you are. You could be Southern Hemisphere, but in up here, it's when summer. The days get a little longer. It's a bit brighter. The drier tracks for the games appear, and you get some of those great games in the knockout stages of the Champions Cup. But particularly, it's always kind of a festival of rugby up here in the Northern Hemisphere. So excited for that. Who are you got? Are you support? Who is your team still in the mix? six? Who you got? Who do you think's going to take it all the way? Even as well in the Women's Six Nations, who you got? Is it going to be England again? Are France going to throw a spanner in the works? Let us know all of that down in the comments below. Who you got? Who are you following? Who are your team? Are you a Super Rugby fan who's just idly interested in the Europe stuff, or the other way around? Just let us know down below.
Yeah, and any thoughts on anything in the world of rugby that you want us to talk about or cover, please do let us know. We'll definitely take a look at any of that in this kind of period as well. But we will see you again. We're going to try and do one next week in advance of that big England-France game. Hopefully do a breakdown of that. We might see you then. If not, we'll see you in the following week or the coming weeks to come. But listen, thanks so much for tuning in on our little check-in show that's still probably more than 2 hours long.
Nice and short.
Exactly. Nice to check in with you guys on the world of rugby, and we will see you again soon.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye-bye. Give me a sec.